Hi, everybody. It's Bill Little. Welcome to Stratosphere Lounge. What you just saw was how rapidly a 62-year-old mind can pull down a menu and select the right microphone. That's a long time. Good to be here. Welcome. Good to see everybody as usual. So, yeah, we're off to a great start. Merlin wants to know when we get to see the Stratosphere Lounge in VR. Well, it'll be rendered in VR in full 3D at 60 frames a second, Merlin, because the video quality is essential. Even the slightest bit of motion blur will throw you off and ruin the entire Stratosphere Lounge experience. I remember listening to some guy in gaming he said he said anything below 30 frames a second is like sandpaper on my eyes. Okay, that's a high class problem. Anyway, here we are. So it's good to be here. Sorry about missing last week. It was just a lot to do, and just a couple quick little updates, and we'll jump into the comment section over at Facebook and see what we have going. Well, it's been a quiet 2 weeks here in Lake Wobegon. The progress with the animation is enough to make a grown man cry, and I'm a grown man. And essentially, I don't know if it's just. I suspect it's probably got to do with the fact that I'm just running out of neurons. You know, that I just don't have that many cells left. Either that, or the cells that I do have left are like my knees. All their cartilage is gone. You know, they're slow. So, having had to, I do an awful lot of reading, consume a lot of information, and working on getting these animations going requires very, very, very specific arcane knowledge. And there are times when I just try to stuff it into my head, and it's just like trying to get 24 sardines into a 20 sardine can sometimes. I don't know how many sardines are normally in a can. I can't stand them. I think I don't eat fish at all. It's disgusting. Because I grew up in the water and I know what goes on down there. Anyway, so here's what the last 2 weeks have been like for me. I will get into a situation where I know specifically what I want to do, and I got a pretty good idea of how to do it. And I can get it 95, 97% of the way there, and it doesn't work. And then I spend 6 hours, and that's not an exaggeration, 6 hours with this bone in my teeth, looking at all of these tutorials on the web, trying to figure out what I'm missing, what box did I not check, among the thousands of boxes that you have to check. What did I miss? And during every one of the single seconds in that 6 hours, which happens to me all the time, I tell myself, I try not to tell myself this actually, because otherwise I'll go insane. I say to myself, if there was somebody who knew what they were doing, this would be fixed. This would be over in 10 seconds. This is a 10-second problem that I'm not getting. And if I had somebody new Unreal, we'd be done by now. Show would be finished. But really knew it. So I have to keep trying. Now, there's some excellent advice. Do press DW. Sorry about that. Did you try turning it off and turning it back on again? Many times. By the way, I saw that once attached to a meme that said, listen, if I'm ever on life support and it flatlines, just turn it off and turn it back on again, see what happens. Anyway, with that said, I am making, when I say incremental progress, it's almost chokes in my throat to say incremental progress, because I am spending an awful lot of time and effort to make incremental progress. It genuinely is 5 steps forward, 4 steps back. It's anyway. When you throw on top of that just a general cussedness that has accompanied me my entire life, I have had it's not a character flaw, because obviously look who we're talking about here, but a character, just a fascinating facet from my facets. I occasionally have, and probably not even so occasionally, I will convince myself of something without even thinking about it. I just say, that's true. It's a heuristics problem. What it is, this is true, and therefore nothing else that I'm trying to do following that works because my assumption was wrong. I think I mentioned a couple times recently, I don't know why it came up so much, but I spent 45 minutes 10 years ago looking for a VHS tape that I was certain was in my living room. And it's not a big room. I was sure it was there. I searched for 45 minutes. I couldn't find it. I was ready to cry. I was so frustrated. And then I sit on the couch and try to imagine what the hell happened. And I'm looking on the coffee table, and right in front of my eyes, which I have glanced at 100 times, is the VHS tape, except that the VHS tape I'd forgotten I had put in its white case. And I wasn't looking for a white rectangle, I was looking for a black rectangle. And since I wasn't looking for a white rectangle, my eyes passed over that so many times. Sometimes that'll happen to me with like an airplane reservation. I'm sure, yes, is it this time? Absolutely. Nope, wrong. So, hey, good idea, Marusha. Unreal Engine Discord. I should use that. Why didn't I think of that? See, I'm just getting too old for this business. The Discord. Of course there's a Discord. I'm not very familiar with Discord. It'll probably take me another 3 or 4 weeks to figure out the nuance of that. I used it a little bit. Anyway, to continue this story. So I have this motion capture suit that I bought 14 months ago, thinking I just put it on and use it. And I finally got a chance to put it on. Now, it's called the Perception Neuron suit, and it's the least expensive one out there, but it does a pretty good job. But the problem with it was, since it's the least expensive one out there, it's essentially a harness. It's a series of straps. There's like a Velcro harness here, and then there's one around your head, and harnesses down your legs, and all this other stuff. It's really tedious. It's a pain in the neck to get on and off. So I discovered that the company has, since I bought it, made a Velcro suit, a little black Smurf suit that I get to wear. And that's nice because you don't have to constantly adjust all the straps, or so I thought. So we tested it out with a guy I know who's done a lot of motion capture, just not all that terribly familiar with Unreal. And sure enough, it's working. So we did that with the harnesses, and I thought, this is fantastic. Now I'm going to move all the sensors off of the harnesses and onto the little spandex suit, and then everything will be easier next time. It'll be nice and easy. So I move all the sensors over, take them off of the harness, and plug them into the suit. And this is when I'm getting ready to spend a day or 6 hours doing mocap. And I'm jazzed, by the way. I'm heading home. This is going to be great. I'm going to do this. I'm really looking forward to it. And I get home and I'm moving the sensors over, and I've got everything plugged in, but there are 2 sensor bands right here on the lower arm, and I don't have the sensor receptacles. I've got the total number of actual sensors, but I don't have 2 of the mounts. I'm missing 2 of the mounts. And I thought, well, where the hell did they go? I know we were using everything just 2 days ago. We had everything hooked up. And now here I am, and I got these 2 missing things. And I started searching for it. And then I started searching for it some more. And then I started searching for it some more. And then I tore the house down searching for it. I spent 3 hours looking for these missing sensors. I called the guy who had done the work. Is there any chance you could have possibly put it in your bag? Nope. Just absolutely at a state of I'm done. That's it. I'm done. So the next day, early, I call Neuron back in Florida because I really want to get some of this motion capture stuff done. So I call them and I say, hey guys, I emailed them because their telephone directs you to their email. And they got great customer service. So I emailed them and said, listen, I somehow have lost the lower arm sensors for this thing. So Neuron's got 3 different. The one I bought was the best one at the time. They've had 2 generations since then. And I get an email back or something, and I say, no, you don't understand. Here's a photograph. Took some pictures. Here's these sensors here on the floor. I don't have the mounts for that. And then they email back and say, Oh no, no, that those mounts on the lower arm are for the third generation stuff. Second generation stuff doesn't have any sensors there at all. And I'm looking at the store where you can buy these replacements, and sure enough, there it is. Upper arm sensor goes right to the hand. And the reason I couldn't find those sensors was because they don't exist. And this is the kind of thing I'm talking about, where the brain just locks in, and I'm absolutely sure about something. And Natasha was helping me search the house. I practically started, taking, tiles off the roof, and I think she said, "Are you sure it's there?" Absolutely, I'm sure. Why would they have these sensors if it wasn't there? Well, they had the sensors for a different set of neurons. It would have been nice if they told me that, but nevertheless, anyway, there you go. So that's the kind of thing I'm facing. It's just like, oh, please, God, I can't stand it. I can't stand it. And this is the last thing I'll say. We'll get on to the questions, which means we got another half hour of talking about this. Is this something I need to know about? No, I guess not. I know when I'm doing really well because nobody's commenting in the comment section, and the comment section is wide awake and flying. What the heck was it? It'll come to me eventually. You can all just sit there and wait while I let these brains slowing down. Anyway, I remember. So I get this animation. I record some animation, and there it is, and it's recorded, plays back in the neuron system. Hooray! Now all I have to do is import it into Unreal. But every single piece of software out there, including the motion capture suits, have their different bones, their different naming conventions. Some of them have different names for the bones. The bones are the physical things that move, and then they deform the skin and the mesh to make it look like the characters moving. Some have more bones than others. Some have different names than others. And so you have to get it into Unreal, and then you have to retarget everything, and you have to make sure that every one of these, 200 bones, and something like that, including fingers, they are all got to match up one-to-one, and all of the boxes have to be checked. And I import this animation, and the guy's floating upside down, and he's, and it reminded me of something. I remember thinking, is this really the best we can do? Honestly, why can't I just drag this onto this and drop it and have it work? And I realized that right now, and this may be changed in Unreal 5, I don't know, but right now it reminded me of what I had to go through back in the early 90s, 92, 93. I had built a network, a PC network, to render stuff. I was doing 3D animation for a while back there. And I was building PCs, and I remember back in those days, if you wanted to add a peripheral of any kind, you had to set dip switches, little mechanical things, and then you had to go in and you had to go into like the DOS prompt, and you had to configure all the ports, and you had to manually assign all the ports and all of this other stuff. And it was just like I spent 2 hours doing one thing, and it was driving me nuts. And then as the technology advanced, we get this. We get plug and play. You plug it in and it plays. So I'm going through all this trouble with all these animations and all these hundreds of different formats and all the rest of this stuff. And I realized, no, sooner or later, the software will get sophisticated enough so that you'll be able, it'll do it for you. It'll be just drop it in. It doesn't matter where you recorded it from. It doesn't matter what the bone structure is. The software will figure it out. But it's not figuring it out now, which means I have to, and it is torture. By the way, here's the USB, the Universal Serial Bus. I just did a little research into this. Do you know what the chance of plugging this thing in the wrong way is? It's 100%. You'd think it'd be 50-50, but it's not. The chance of you plugging a USB connector into a USB socket incorrectly is 100%. And the reason is because you will plug it in the right way, but you won't have it aligned exactly. which means you will think that you plugged it in the wrong way. So that's one. So then you have to pull it out, and then you have to flip it over and plug it in again. And now you meet even more resistance because now you realize it's really not moving at all, which means you have to remove it a second time, twist it around, and plug it in the third time. And then you finally can get the thing in there. But it is really, as John Pershing points out, it's plug, flip, plug, flip, plug. Yeah, your chance of getting it right the first time, 0. All right, enough of this nonsense. I am making some progress here. Like I said, when I say I'm ready to go on, that's probably your sign. We're probably about 20 minutes left. I did an animation. There's a great asset, rural Australia. So I did a guy just walking down the road in rural Australia. Looks really good. One of the problems is that this stuff is so. This is actually interesting. We talked about this before with the show on vision and film, and I love that show. That was a really good show. But one of the many things that is easy to get wrong is this. I showed you a couple weeks ago that scene with me and the Zoe character on the moon. And everybody said, well, the suits aren't moving. It's like, I know that. There might not be, that's another problem I have to solve. So when you get the problem of the head attached and moving, then, I don't know if I showed you guys the walking on the moon animation. I don't know if I did that. I'm going to show it to you just because it gives me another quick idea. This is very fast. I'm right here. I know exactly where it is. Hang on one second. This took a while to get this right. Hang on. Don't you worry. This will be quick. And the reason I'm going to show you this is because it gave me an interesting idea. Or somebody else gave me an interesting idea and I stole it. And now I have to go over here. Okay. So anyway, all this stuff going on, and it's just slower than Christmas, but eventually it is getting there. And as I was saying, there's one thing that's really strange, and it's not something you would really anticipate. So they have a standard kind of an animation called an idle. And an idle is where a character is essentially standing still. But when you're standing still, you never stand still. You're always moving, always subtle little moves like this. Heads moving around. There's hundreds of idles animations. And if you don't have them, the character's just a statue. But you throw an idle in there and it looks a lot more real. So I found out when I did that message for Natasha that I did show you that come on, do it. That it looked wrong. And I couldn't figure out what it was about it that looked wrong. And what I realized was that when you, in other words, I had the head and the face separate from the body. The body was just idling. And what I discovered was it just looked weird. And the reason it looked weird was because these things were not in unison. I couldn't put my finger on it at first, and then I realized, okay, the character's turning his head, but the eyes aren't moving first. So he's turning his head like this because my eyes haven't moved. Then the eyes move, and it's weird. And so you've got to get this right, because when you turn your head, you look first. An instant, you just look and then you turn. And if you don't get that, you don't know exactly what's wrong, but something's wrong. And you'll see this in this one example. It's extremely fast. It's like, I don't know, 6-second animation, something like that. It's just downloaded. But it took me forever to get the talking head on the body in motion through space, and here you go. And I'll tell you what I want to do with this. No sound. Hooray, problem solved. So, like I said, progress, incremental, slow, tedious, painful process, but nevertheless, progress. So, the reason that interested me is somebody suggested to me, I think, I'm going to get, I'm going to play it one more time just in a second just to show you. That's a science fiction suit, but there are some photorealistic Apollo suits, moon suits. And I'm going to get an Apollo moon suit. I'm going to get a really good one. I'm going to get it rigged, and then I'm going to make a metahuman as close to my face as I can. They normally don't make them that good looking because they don't want other people to be discouraged, but I'll figure out a way. And then I'm going to put my head and face and my voice, obviously, into an Apollo suit. And the nice thing about the Apollo suit is the helmet doesn't turn. So you're good. It's actually easier. And then I'm going to get a lunar module asset, and maybe I'll take the ascent module off, and then I'm going to be able to walk on the moon. And I'll be walking on the moon, and I'll lift up the big gold visor, and I'll have the Snoopy on, the headset on, and I can broadcast from the moon. I can broadcast from the Apollo 11 landing site. And that would give you a real opportunity. In fact, if I were ever to put together a video about why the moon landing is not a hoax, that'd be the way to do it, would be to do it from the moon. Anyway, so one more time, just for giggles here, you can watch it again, and if you imagine that the talking head inside there is my talking head, as it is right now, talking to you like this, and the science fiction suit becomes an Apollo suit, when I really tweak out the rendering, it could look pretty good. So here it is just one more time. And most importantly, and we did get this from the Stratosphere Lounge, this allows me to make the commercial for the Free Frontier. I can make the commercial, the one about the Chinese astronauts landing, and then, in fact, that's actually easy. That would be a pretty good test project for me. It's got a good Chinese spacesuit, and it's brown and ugly like the Russian suits. But I can actually do that commercial and do it relatively quickly too. I could probably do that in a week. So that'll be fun. The commercial about the Chinese landing on the moon and then panning over, and a couple of astronauts are waiting for them and so on. It's going to be great. Okay. Enough of this silliness and nonsense. Let's get to the questions. I'm going to go to the Facebook questions today because I haven't really taken the ones from the membership thing. And it's really important to do membership questions. But on the other hand, this Stratosphere Lounge has always been kind of a Facebook thing. And so on some level, I'm kind of okay with that too. So we'll see. Anything that makes my life easier, I can justify. That's the main thing to remember here. So let's go to our Facebook page here. Okay, here we go. 19 more comments. Now, I hope all of you are seated, because sometimes when shocking news comes, it's good to be seated, because literally you might just faint dead away. We don't want anybody crashing to the floor and hurting their heads. So if you are restrained or otherwise of stout constitution, I guess I'm going to have to be the person to tell you that the first question there is from Eric Blake. And so is the second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth, seventh. Seventh. Don't take it the wrong way, Eric. We love you. It's always actually very just charming to see. But in any event, let's get on with the Eric Blake show. So here we go. Hello, Bill. Hello, Eric Blake, who's responsible for 4,900 of the 5,000 views this show sometimes gets on YouTube. If I may make a further inquiry about the nature of Quare. Quare is that series of sketches from Harry Enfield, Paul Whitehouse, which I think is one of the best pieces of comic acting I've ever seen. In your expert opinion and analysis, Billy, might one be Quare and not Quare at the same point in time? Might, in fact, the question be about one being queer in itself, or that's a lot of queers. You know what? I don't really know if I can answer that, because not pretty sure I don't understand it. It's two British guys, and if you want to see it, it's just hilarious. I just think it's one of the funniest things on the internet. If you go to YouTube and search for Harry Enfield Quare, Quare, and it's two old guys at an old school British club, and one of them's got a newspaper, and the sketch just repeats again and again and again. The guy holds up a picture of the newspaper, and here's a picture of David Cameron, and the first guy says, "Do you know who this is? Have you heard of David Cameron?" "Yes." "Do you think he's a Quare?" And off it goes. Same sketch again and again and again. discussing why this guy looks like a queer, sounds like a queer, acts like a queer, is on television like a queer, is married to a beautiful woman like Bunny, who's a queer, but he is married. And I just find it hilarious. In any event, I don't understand the question, so sadly, all of that talk was for nothing. George Freeland, hey, there's a little island of non-Eric Blake. If you were to make a movie about the flight of the Pacific Clipper, how much of the Boeing 314 do you think you could get away with not physically reproducing? Well, sir, that is a specific question that I am fully prepared to answer. The Boeing 314 is a flying boat. It's not a seaplane, it's a flying boat. And by the way, speaking of Harry Enfield, if you like the queer sketch, search for Harry and Paul, the Surgeons. It's another running sketch about these two guys. It is brilliant. Back to this question, which is a lovely break from everything. So they had these flying boats, just enormous, big seaplanes, single hull with sponsons out there. And this is how you traveled the Pacific. You went from Los Angeles to Tokyo, before the war anyway. In a flying boat, you made a number of fuel stops and off you went. So the question is, if I were to make a movie about that, how much of it could I do without physically reproducing it? I assume that means how much of it could I do in CG? And the easy answer is all of the exteriors I could do tomorrow, and you wouldn't be able to tell that it wasn't a real airplane. From the very beginning, metal is, especially hard metal, hard surface, it's called hard surface modeling. Anything that doesn't have to deform is not only easy for CG to do, but it's really where it's at its best. There's a game out there, video game, crowdsourced video game largely, or at least a lot of crowd participation, called a DCS, Digital Combat Simulator. And that is running at 60 frames a second, and there are shots from DCS where I, honest to God, cannot tell if that is well, I know it's a CG rendering, but I couldn't tell. And I would say I have an expert eye both on CG and also on airplanes. Some of it's just astonishing. So airplanes could do really well. One of the things that you would have to do, and this is a more subtle point, and I'm not going to get too deep in this because we covered this a couple weeks ago, but if you really want to sell people on it, you have to shoot the CG airplane the way you would shoot a real airplane. And you cannot have shots that you couldn't get in a real airplane, or else it's going to look like CG. And a great example of that is in a movie, let's say a car, you're having a fast and furious chase, and a car flips over and rolls, and a tire comes off. Well, if you're going to shoot that in the old days, and pretty much any time, you shoot it from a distance, you see the tire fly off and so on. But once we got a hold of computer graphics, then kind of Michael Bay kind of thing happened where, so now since we can fake the tire, what we'll do is we'll have the tire come right by our head like that. And every time I see one of those, I just leave. You'll often see this with CG dogfights, where you're hanging out there in space, and here comes the plane, and it goes right past you. And in fact, it goes so right so much, I'll try that again. It comes so close to you that they throw in a little camera shake, like, well, you could never get a shot like that. It's simply impossible to get a shot of a real airplane like that in the real world. No one could fly that close to a drone. And so when you do that, you're trading a cheap thrill for realism. So if I had to make something about the Pacific Clipper, the Pan Am Clipper, I would shoot it as if it was a real airplane, which means you can do like a big telephoto close-up and stuff. And there's a YouTube channel called The Corridor Crew, and these are special effects guys. They're all like 11. But it's a really fun channel. I really like it a lot. And they often just break down really good and really bad effects, and they make their own effects. They're very, very talented. In fact, they did something about like a fake police robot, which is not only some of the best animation I've ever seen, but is actually genuinely hilarious. So the Corridor Crew was taking a look at good animation, and I think they were talking about one of the Transformer movies, which is not exactly great literature, but Michael Bay knows what he's doing. And they point out when they break it down shot by shot or frame by frame, they point out that, look, the camera, which, remember, this camera doesn't really exist because the things that they're shooting doesn't really exist. The animation is kind of falling out of frame. It's not perfectly centered, and they're shooting it like the camera's trying to catch up with it. I told you months ago now that I'm working with a guy who did work on Babylon 5 in the 90s, which, it's done on a home computer. It's amazing what they did. And they had to invent things like explosions. They had to invent a way to do it. You could just get a particle system. It didn't exist. And then he worked on Battlestar Galactica, the 2005-6 reboot, something like that. And when I first saw that Battlestar Galactica animation, I talked to two of the guys. I've gotten to know them, one of them very well, the other one not so well. Two guys who worked on what I think is one of the best CG shots of all time, and that's the destruction of the Resurrection ship in Battlestar Galactica. And in Battlestar Galactica, I noticed this the first time I watched it because I'm aware of these kind of things, but they did something in Battlestar Galactica that's genuinely brilliant. And what they did was, they would treat the animation as if it was handheld. So you had camera shake, but you had a lot of like focus pulls and zooms. So you'd be looking at this like a newscaster guy, and then you'd say, oh, there are the fighters, and it would move, and then it would zoom in, and it gave it a sense of realism because it didn't treat the camera like it was CG. It shot the CG as if there was a guy standing on the hull of the Galactica trying to catch this in real time and not quite getting it. What the Corridor crew pointed out and what the Galactica guys did was they intentionally put imperfections and flaws into it to make it more believable. That's the problem with computer animation out of the box. It's too perfect. Movement is a keyframe movement. If I start here and I end here and it divides it up into 210 steps, it's absolutely smooth. Nothing moves like that in the real world. There's no camera shake. There's nothing. And this is why it feels stilted. And if you're really going to try and capture realism, you've got to go for what your brain has been trained to believe through, decades and decades of watching television shows. So Battlestar Galactica did that. In fact, Battlestar Galactica, my friend Jeff told me this about working on it. They took this so seriously that they had a real director of photography from the real world come in, and they recorded him doing focus pulls. How long does it take for him to acquire a target and then zoom it in? How many frames? And they reproduced that, and they got it down exactly. It's absolutely fantastic. It's fantastic. So anyway, is this something interesting here? I got a chance to talk to the guy who did the Cylons in Battlestar Galactica. Hand animated them, all of them. Yes, Wizard 13. I will answer your question is it there? Let me see if I can find it. Okay, well, whatever. I do requests. In any event. So to answer your question, George, eventually, as we eventually find our way to answer most of the questions here, I would shoot all the exteriors in CG. You wouldn't be able to tell the difference. I would shoot it as if I was in a photography plane. Some of the best aerial photography ever is taken from the back of a B-25, where the entire tail gunner section has just been removed. And I forget the name of this photographer, but he's the best in the world. And he's harnessed, he's strapped into this thing, but he's basically got this entire open space looking backwards. There's nothing between him and the airplane. There's no windows he has to shoot out of or through or around. He's just strapped into the back of this thing, and the B-25 flies here, and then he's on a radio, and he tells the pilot, okay, come left a little bit, and he does a long lens, and it looks fantastic. So I would make sure that everything that I shot about the airplane in CG would have to be a shot that looked like it could come from the airplane. And one of the shots that does actually sell realism, although it's relatively new, is the shot that appears like there's a camera bolted to the hull. So in the case of the Pacific Clipper, if you imagine a shot where a camera like a GoPro had been bolted like next to the vertical stabilizer and was looking over the top of the thing, and since it's on the plane, nothing moves. That can occasionally really work, but that's a relatively new thing. That's kind of a GoPro thing. But that kind of camera bolted onto the wings, when I was flying the Long Easy, I did a couple videos like that. That can sell. So I would do the whole thing outside, as if I can't get the shot in the real world, I can't get the shot in the CG world. The much more interesting part of this question is, what could I not get away with? If I really wanted to do this and sell this, I don't see any, sell it in terms of convincing people. I don't think there's any way you could do this without physically building the interior of the flying boat, was it 319, 314? You couldn't do it without that. And this is where the technology is today on Mandalorian. Mandalorian has a guy in reflective armor. If you tried to render every one of those frames in CG and do the whole show CG, it's not going to look right, because despite the fact that MetaHumans is good, it's not perfect yet. And so when you've got a guy in reflective armor, you can't green screen him, because while you can cut him out, you still get a little green tinge. You could probably even beat that, but you can't get the reflections on him. So Mandalorian is shot in a like, I think it's almost like a 300-degree round, enormous wall of tiny little LEDs, and they generate the scene in real time, and all the reflections are and the lighting natural, perfect, it's fantastic. But the problem now is, okay, so if you're going to shoot a physical guy in a physical Mandalorian suit, and you've got the LED screens in the background, so your clouds and your horizon and your and your little town and all the rest of it's all rendered, that's fine. Where is the point where the physical actors interact with the non-physical generated world? And generally speaking, what they do on Mandalorian is, if they're shooting an interior, the interior building will be rendered in CG. All the lighting will be done in CG. The lighting from the screens actually lights the physical character, so it's a perfect match. But when you get close to physically interacting with objects, you virtually always have to do that practically. And it just now struck me, I didn't even think about it till just a split second, that I had solved this problem. No, people I was working with solved this problem. Solved this problem back in 2013 when we did the virtual presidency thing. I think the special effects in the virtual president, I think I look more real in the White House in the virtual president segments than Joe Biden does. And so how did we do that? Clearly I wasn't in the White House, and clearly I didn't have a shot of the Rose Garden and the Washington Monument or whatever outside my window. So this is a good example. What was real and what wasn't. When we did the virtual presidency, the entire room wasn't CG, it was a photograph. The stuff out the window was all a photograph. There were curtains on the windows. Those were real, practical, we call them. And the thing that really sold it was my good friend Fritz, who produced that thing. We spent a significant amount of money renting a replica of the Resolute desk. Is it the Resolute desk? I think that's what it is. The president's desk is made of wood from it's a gift from the British, and it was made out of an anti-slavery ship. I think it was HMS Resolute. I might have that wrong, but I'm going to find out in a second. So the desk was practical. Everything on the desk was practical. Pictures on the desk were practical, all of it. And so everything that I interacted with, everything that I could touch, everything that I could move, when I would rest my hands on the desk, I could theoretically have rested my hands on a green screen thing. That's what I did in the Star Trek Afterburner that I love so much, where I'm on the bridge of the Enterprise. That one was entirely CG, and it doesn't look nearly as good as the virtual presidency. So to answer your question, George, I would, if I really had a chance to do that, I would build practical interiors. I would take the practical interior outside and I'd shoot it in natural daylight coming in through the windows. And then I would do the exteriors with CG, and I think that would be awfully convincing. I will say that if you're prepared to make a little bit of a suspension of disbelief, like we were on that moon clip we saw a minute ago, I am getting when Unreal 5 releases later this year, I'll know for sure. But I will tell you that one way or another, if I have to do this on my own and it takes me 10 years, one way or another, I am going to recreate the Battle of Off Samar. I'm going to tell the story of Taffy 3, and I'm going to make it look as realistic as it possibly can. That is not a terribly big problem. Certainly not a big problem from the modeling point of view, from a water point of view. Water's a little tougher. In fact, it's a lot tougher. But I am going to do the whole thing. I'm going to tell the story of Taffy 3 in CG, and I'm going to really do it. And I can get people who could take a metahuman model and get it close enough to Ernest Evans' face and close enough to Copeland's face to really sell it. And honestly, I want to do that really, 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 really badly. I talked to the producer at Daily Wire, who was the producer on America's Forgotten Heroes, and I said, "Hey, remember me, Rob? Any idea when this show might drop?" So they have not released it yet. I think he said they might have released one episode of it audio-wise. Daily Wire has spent most of the money on it. They paid me to write it and be in it. We had a practical set, which was just gorgeous, like the set on Apollo 11. But for whatever reason, they have not finished the post-production. They haven't edited it or released it yet. That's entirely their business. I'm real clear on this, by the way. I have never, ever felt any sense of remorse or dismay over any work that I was contracted to do. They paid me, the check cleared, and it's their property. Can do with it what they want. But I would like to see it released. In any event, one way or another. My description of Taffy 3 is my favorite episode. It's me talking about it for an hour. But if I were to do it, I think I would make it a feature-length animated film, and I'd get it as realistic as I could. And I would tell the whole thing. And you really could. You could really, 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 really do it. You could be right there on the bridge, which is spectacularly tiny on the USS Johnston. It's even smaller on the Samuel B. Roberts. And I don't know. Maybe I'd use human actors keyed in, possibly. You're not spending a whole lot of time with the humans on that one, and you're not moving them around a lot. That actually might be the way to do it. Very inexpensively build a couple of props, but you render the bridge of the Fletcher class destroyer and the Butler class destroyer escorts, and maybe the inside of the Jeep carrier. And you could use real actors on that. But I would want it to... I don't know if any of you saw Greyhound, but perfect example. I mean, Greyhound doesn't look real to me. It's excellent CG, but it doesn't look real. But it's believable, if that makes sense. It's a Tom Hanks movie about it's the exact same ship. I could just borrow their model. It's a Fletcher class destroyer. Greyhound takes place in the Atlantic, fighting U-boats, but it's the exact same ship as the USS Johnston in Taffy 3. So I could get it pretty close to Greyhound level, and my point is that's good enough. It looks really good. I don't. It just has to look consistent. This is the suspension of disbelief thing, and that applies to anything. I'm going to go see a vampire movie, that's fine. Great. I believe in vampires for the next 90 minutes. And as long as it's consistent, and as long as it doesn't look cheesy enough so that it takes you out, oh, that looks like crap. But as long as that look is consistent, and it is consistent in Greyhound, then it'll work. And speaking of Greyhound, Bart's Treasure says Greyhound was good, but it didn't really go anywhere. Exactly right. It was a well-written bad script. Tom Hanks did a lot of research on that. I have a real good ear for the authenticity of dialogue, especially military dialogue, and all of the call-outs in that show were really carefully researched, because it sounded exactly like what they would say. And the acting was great and all the rest of it. I believed every part of it, but the story didn't go anywhere. You meet this woman in the beginning. Is it his wife? Is it his girlfriend? Why is this so distant? What's so strange? And you never see her again. There's no connection to it. It's like they ran out of time. It's like they shot the action sequences and then they ran out of time. And Ed Smith says he hated the fake love interest. I kind of agree. It just didn't need to be there. But if you're going to bring this woman into the beginning of the movie to humanize Tom Hanks, you gotta. If you're going to set something up, you got to pay it off, and it just didn't pay it off. But it was great to see that stuff in action, and happily for the Taffy 3 project, which is not even on the books yet, but which will happen, so help me. Happily for me, I don't have to do the research of what a shell impact from a Fletcher-class destroyer would look like, because people with a lot more money than I have already done it, and I could use Greyhound as a sort of a visual reference. Now, Greyhound takes place in the North Atlantic, so everything's overcast and dark and gray, but South Pacific. I mean, that particular day had rain showers, and that's one of the reasons why they survived as long as they did, duck into rain squalls. But the Taffy 3 story would be much brighter. Which brings me to another quick point, and I know this is what we talk about, so if you like it, great, and if not, then you're welcome to watch the Troposphere Lounge. I have not seen an exception to this. I don't think I've ever seen an exception to this. Whenever they shoot a World War II movie in color, they desaturate the living hell out of it. Sometimes they'll desaturate it so much it's practically black and white. Vikings is practically black and white. It's dark blue and gray. I have never seen a historical movie of any kind that had natural color. And I think that's because people just wouldn't believe it. But to me, I'd have to see it to know. If you saw it in perfect 4K real color, I don't know if people would be able to process it. When we think of World War II or the Civil War, when we think of the Civil War, we think of sepia, and we think of that kind of real intense grain. When we think of World War II, we usually think in black and white. John pointed out Das Boot. Das Boot is I think if it's not the best war movie ever made, it's one of them. It's certainly the best submarine movie ever made, and even Das Boot is not actual color. It's given a look, and I've always been interested in. Here's a great example. If you saw Flags of Our Fathers or Letters from Iwo Jima, when those guys go ashore, it is so desaturated that there's barely any color at all. And it feels right, and it's no question it's the right thing to do. But because Clint Eastwood, who's an absolute genius, because Clint Eastwood is putting a technological patina on the movie to make it feel the way you would think it would feel, because whenever we think of Iwo Jima, all we have are the photographs. But my point is, when those guys went ashore, it was brilliant color. I did a firewall about that, I think, called The Color of War or something. If you look at the South Pacific, the colors at like Tarawa, or Pele'u, or any of them, Iwo, but mostly like Tarawa especially. These guys, you see them trudging, and you see them, and it's, the water's great. The water's like brilliant turquoise. It's just brilliant, knock your eyes out turquoise. And the idea that these guys are moving in a world with that much color, and the color's been taken away because of the technology of black and white film. If you were to show like the Tarawa landings in actual color, people would have a hard time believing it. And somebody points out War in the Pacific in color. Yes, that's all true, but that's still film, and it's been color timed. It's not Let me rephrase this. If I were to be able to take a 4K camera, a modern 4K digital camera, when they went ashore at Tarawa, okay? If I was able to cover that actual landing with 4K cameras, it would look as good as anything that you see of somebody at the. It would look real. Those cameras today are that good. It would look really real. It'd be crystal clear, sharp. Color would be perfect. There wouldn't be any motion blur. None of these things that trick our eye into thinking it's historical or a movie. And the reason I want to do that is because I think it's important for people to see the battle the way it was, not the way it felt. So somebody, Marusha, pointed out, they said the color or lack thereof helps sell the grittiness of war in a sense. That's precisely it, and that's exactly the word, grittiness. They desaturate the color. Saving Private Ryan is utterly desaturated. And they do that to give it a kind of a grittiness and a darkness and a historical patina, all of that. But I think it would be fascinating to see the Tarawa landing in actual, real color with actual, real people. I know why they don't do it, because if they did do it, it would look like a video. It would look like, oh, somebody took a camera out there and they're recreating the Tarawa landing. But that's how it looked. And that's the thing that I think is missing and I think is really important. I would like to see, I understand it doesn't work, because if it did, they would have done it. But maybe the answer would be to see like the raw footage before they color it. I know that if they screened the raw footage of the landings on Iwo Jima or whatever from Flags of Our Fathers, before they did the color passes on it, you would look at it and go, oh, it's a documentary about filming the movie. But that's what it actually looked like. Yeah. And when I was at PJTV, I interviewed a guy who was a Higgins boat captain. And he went in at Tarawa, went in 4 times. That was some of the best things I ever did. I loved that interview. Called A Soldier's Story. And I hadn't even thought about it before, but I always thought, if you're on the Higgins boat, that's the landing craft that go ashore and then the front comes down and so on. I always thought, it must be great to be the Higgins boat driver, because, yes, you got to go through the fire on the way in, but you get a little bit of armor protection and the soldiers get dropped off and then you get to get the hell out of there. And the thing I didn't realize until I got a chance to talk to this guy, Leon, was, yes, it's true, you do get the hell out of there, but then you got to come back again. And you got to come back again, and then you got to come back again. If you're infantry, you go in once. These guys go in 4 or 5 times. And they go in the first wave, and then they go back to get the second wave, and they land the second wave, and then they're taking the casualties from the first wave back to the ship to pick up the third wave, and that is not pretty. He told me a story about a guy who basically died in his arms on the way back, or died on the deck anyway. He's taking the boat back out to the landing craft, and he's got a Marine who was just shot up real badly, and this guy just basically grabbed Leon, the Higgins boat captain, and said, "Remember me." And he said, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, goes about his business, turns around half a minute later, and the kid's dead. That's, when you don't tell those stories, then you end up with a population that doesn't understand what reality really is and has no respect for the past, because they have no reason to respect the past. They have no reason to respect these guys, because they've never seen what they did. Can hardly blame him for that. By the way, somebody's still a little conversation about Das Boot. Obviously, needless to say, the reason Das Boot is so good, there's only one reason that Das Boot works so as well as it does, and that is because 90% of the movie takes place inside the submarine, and they rebuilt a German U-boat. I don't know if it was a Type 7. I guess it was probably a Type 7. Might have been. Yeah, North Sea probably. It wasn't a 13, I don't think. Anyway, they built the U-boat to specification. They didn't add stuff, and they didn't make it bigger. They built the actual U-boat, and they filmed it inside a U-boat, and And that claustrophobia and that sense of when they're running down the hatches and swinging through the doors and stuff, you feel like you're on board the damn U-boat. And since the entire movie takes place inside the U-boat, and since you are inside it, you very quickly begin to feel like I'm really inside this thing. And when the depth charges start to come down, you think, I personally am in physical danger. That's the magic of movies. So, yeah, it was just great. By the way, I told you how much I like Crimson Tide, and I watched it again. And that scene of the missile launches, it's one of the best pieces of filmmaking ever. I'm not going to get into that again. But I did, since then, watch Crimson Tide again, and then I took a look at footage from documentary footage shot just a couple years ago from on board the Ohio, I guess. And what you see is, if you look at Crimson Tide, you'll see that the CIC is actually pretty dark. You know, it's kind of dark and kind of dramatic. You see it in real life, and it is fully lit. And even though the people are saying the same things, they're not saying them the same way. That's why Gene Hackman and Denzel Washington, when you get good actors and good lighting like that, you get a kind of super reality. If you'd shot Crimson Tide with actors that look like the actual captains and talk like the actual captains, and it was lit like the actual sub, it wouldn't have any of the power. So there's your trade-off. All right, moving on. Okay, Mr. Eric Blake. Okay, but let's clarify a question from a previous episode. Absolutely. Why go forward when we can always go backwards? Do you think there's a possibility that the Marvel stars, including lefty Mark Ruffalo defending Chris Pratt, Matthew McConaughey's recent comments, etc., point towards the industry ending the blacklist of conservative folks so that those Hollywood conservatives afraid to express themselves, while all the open lefties have no such fear at all, can feel more free to do so? That's really a great question. I think that the two examples that you listed, left-wing actors coming to the defense of Chris Pratt and Matthew McConaughey, is not a change in the industry. It's just an indication of how exceptional Chris Pratt and Matthew McConaughey are in terms of just their personalities. I don't think any of them would have stuck their neck out if it was somebody they liked any less than that. I think they just did that out of whatever residual, genuine human emotions they may have. In other words, there's that line from Pulp Fiction where they're talking about the difference between a dog and a pig, and a dog is a filthy animal and a pig is a filthy animal too. Sam Jackson has a line, what is it? It's something about, a pig would have to have an awful lot of personality and to be treated the same way as a dog. And that's really what it comes down to. He's just such a good guy that it got people that their friendship actually trumped their politics for once, which is kind of nice. Denzel Washington's a great guy, by the way. There's a story I've heard from 3 different people that he was visiting a burn center during the Iraq War. It was kind of a mobile burn center or something, and he didn't announce himself really. He just kind of went down just to cheer up people at Walter Reed, I guess. And that would have to be one charming MFing pig, yep. And Denzel was there, and he was being shown one of these like mobile hospitals that they've got for burn victims and stuff. And the guy was saying, we're trying to get more of these online. And according to the story, he said, well, what do they cost? And the guy said, $1.2 million or something. And he just wrote him a check. He just wrote him a check for it. That kind of thing. That's the kind of guy I want. I don't care what his politics are. Although I guess by doing that, he's already indicated his politics. Denzel Washington is a really special guy. He's got that kind of very rare charisma and likability. Even when he's a villain, and he's played a really good villain in Training Day and things. Even when he's a villain, you like him. But when you see a really good impression of Denzel, you just, not only does it make you laugh, you get this kind of warm feeling like, oh, there he is, there's that laugh. And he's just terrific. So I don't think that's really changing, Eric. To be honest with you, when you talk about, I may or may not have been part of an organization 10 years ago here in Hollywood and that doesn't really exist anymore. It kind of came and went with the times. But one of the things about it is that Hollywood doesn't really exist anymore. In the 10 years since that, I've just watched from the outside. There is no film industry here anymore. It doesn't exist. Nothing gets made here. Nobody can shoot a film in LA. You have any idea how much money it would cost to shoot a film in LA? We went down to shoot a segment during the virtual presidency thing, and we wanted to shoot on Venice Beach for a segment for Light Loudon. And we were down there for the day, and I forget what it cost us in permits, but it was thousands of dollars. And who needs that? And when the Oscars, get fewer views than one of my better videos and one of Mark Dice's or Ben Shapiro's regular videos, it's over. It's actually a good thing. It's good that it's over. All right, so I'm going to skip 7 or 8 Eric Blake questions here and move on. Eduardo Henrique, greetings, Bill Wizard 13 here. I always find your pop culture insights great, and I would like to raise 2 topics. Thank you. First, I know you believe that regular Joes can now produce high-quality content without Hollywoodian budget and ideology attached. Well, isn't that a lovely segue from what we're just talking about, as you plan to do yourself with your sci-fi opus? This year, a group called VLDL focused on making amateur video game comedy videos, crowdfunded a masterpiece called Balin's Root, and he's provided a link in the comment section on YouTube. I recommend you check it out on how a crew of 4 guys in New Zealand managed to do a production of such beauty. The movie is free on YouTube and is very clearly made for fans of RPG games, both tabletop and video game. And second, as an engineer myself, I found that your comment last TSL about engineers not having enough focus on pop culture really hit home. Hundreds of doctor, lawyer, and cop show films, but not engineers. Any idea why? I do. Have you ever talked to one? Best of luck on your sci-fi opus, and my very best regards. That's the only time Sarah Silverman made me laugh out loud. I don't remember if it was on Saturday. It might have been on Sunday Morning Shootout. It might have been on our show. It might have been. But she was on a panel, and there was this black guy on the show, and Sarah Silverman, who I don't generally find very funny, had just been, picking on everybody. And on camera, this black guy leans across the table to her, and he's not asking this meanly. They're all kind of friends. And he says, "Sarah, why do you hate black people so much?" And she just turns to him and she said, "Have you ever met one?" I just found that hilarious. And if you don't see the affection in that, then I can't help you. When you ask the serious question of why are there not more engineers in movies, my answer would be, have you ever met one? But with that said, what engineers do is utterly fascinating and critically, well, say it's critically important. I'm not even gonna insult engineers by making a statement that obvious. Engineers, there are some characters that any writer can write. Any writer can write a pizza delivery guy. Any writer can write a waiter or waitress, because virtually every writer in the world has had those experiences. And then you kind of move up the pyramid of difficulty. I think it's easier to write an infantryman than it is to write a fighter pilot or a sub-commander, only because a greater percentage of the fighter pilot and the sub-commander's dialogue is very arcane kind of, jargon. And now you start to hit the wall, the glass ceiling here. You get guys who write movies about fighter pilots, let's say, and all they know about fighter pilots is what they've seen in other movies about fighter pilots, and none of it's even close to being real. and it's just a result of laziness. I swear to God, if I hear one more military person say copy that, if I ever hear copy that, anytime I hear anybody in any kind of a military movie or TV show, anytime I hear somebody say copy that, I'm gone. I check out. I've made a promise to myself that I am never, ever, ever going to write that line. I understand that military guys say copy that every now and then, but in Hollywood, it is the go-to answer when you want to sound like a tough military guy. We're gonna go down there. Copy that. All right, got it. You sure do know your military. Wow. Copy that. Yep. Copy that. Got that. Yep. Are you going to be going to the bathroom later on this afternoon, or do you need to take a break now? Copy that. Okay, great. We have no idea what we're talking about, do we? No. Roger, by the way, does not mean yes. When somebody says, "Do you have your ticket on you?" and you say Roger, that doesn't make any sense. Roger means I have received and understood your transmission. Roger was used as a phonetic, the old phonetic alphabet. Roger basically meant received. So, Bill, are you going to do a Stratosphere Lounge tonight? Roger. Incomplete sentence. No sense whatsoever. That doesn't give you anything. Bill, did you get my message about doing the Stratosphere Lounge tonight? Roger. That makes sense. And when you talk to guys who are in the military, you find that since so much of the Roger is used, or II, as we just had pointed out, then you find out if you have to say Roger all the time, then rather than saying copy that, you find that a lot of pilots, just for fun, will put different inflections on Roger. And somebody will say, okay, so you guys did you copy all the information for the flight today? And they go, Roger, or yeah, and they'll just play with it. But they use the right words, and they don't use words that sound like the right words. And I understand that the audience doesn't know, but your brain knows, as they said on Red Letter Media. And laziness is laziness. And when you have people constantly saying copy that, copy that, copy that, copy that, it's every time I hear it, I'm out, because it's lazy. Now, an expression that I do like is solid copy. I think that's pretty cool. Chevy 4, how do you copy? Solid copy. That's good. That's and that's the ring of truth. I'm actually very tempted, just as a skill building exercise, to redo an iconic science fiction scene, not shot for shot necessarily, but to redo it using the dialogue from the movie. And I got it down to either the landing of the Nostromo on Alien. I'm almost certainly going to do the dropship scene from Aliens. And I'm just going to use my own assets. I'm going to use my own models and everything. It'll have the music and it'll be cut. I may do it shot for shot, maybe. Maybe I will. But I'm not going to try and make it look like Aliens. I'm just going to use my own assets, but it will be the drop scene thing. And there's a scene in that movie where I just want to scream. First of all, the woman who's playing the dropship pilot, I just want to punch her. I want to figuratively punch her. I don't want to literally punch her. I'm sure she's a very nice person. But I, generally speaking, bought the Marines in Aliens. You could never have a unit that is that undisciplined, but it was internally consistent, and I bought it. But the woman playing the pilot was in a different movie. She's just in a different movie. She gets in there, like puts her gloves on, and she's got aviator sunglasses on in space. We're in space where it's dark. And you can tell it's dark because the next shot shows the dropship coming down from the Nostromo, and they are in utter darkness. And the first thing you want to do when you're flying a complex flying machine in utter darkness is put on a pair of absolutely welder density aviator sunglasses on. And John Pershing got it right. Her direction was cocky pilot. Well, okay. I'm out of the movie. I'm just, okay. Bad acting. Give me a few seconds. Let me get Michael Biehn and Bill Paxton and Sigourney Weaver back on camera, and then I'll be back in the movie again. But she was terrible. And but the thing that made me just lose my mind, and I get way too excited about these things, was they're making the descent, and she's like it's like she's doing an impression of somebody doing a bad pilot actor. She's like 3 levels removed from reality. And they're coming down in the drop ship, and she's got this line, and she says, "We're in the pipe, 5 by 5." And she says it exactly like that. "We're in the pipe, 5 by 5." And I just want to say, okay, that's it. Everybody, lights up, please. Lights, lights. Exits to the side, ladies and gentlemen. You can all just leave right now. We're not gonna see another frame of this. I'm in the pipe. We're in the pipe. 5 by 5. Go F yourself. 5 by 5 is not a physical orientation. 5 by 5 is what you say. How do you read me? And if somebody says I read you 5 by 5, they mean volume and clarity. Volume is 5 on a scale of 1 to 5. Volume is 5. Clarity on a scale of 1 to 5 is 5. Now, I may have gotten clarity and volume reversed, but that's what they mean. So when somebody says I hear you 5 by 5, they're saying I read you loud and clear. Loud and clear. The only time you would, I think loud and clear makes a lot more sense than 5 by 5. The only time I would use a variation of 5 by 5 was if I had to say something that wasn't loud and clear. How do you read me? Loud and clear. I use that all the time in general aviation. I read you just fine. How do you copy? Loud and clear. Okay, great. The only time you would use the X by X would be, how do you read me? 3 by 5. Meaning your if I've got the order right, your volume is a little low, but your clarity is good. Or I read you 4 by 2. You're pretty loud, but you're a lot of static. Yeah, and Dave Big Booty says I read you 6 by 6 because it's 1 higher. Or I read you 11 by 11. Reminds me of Confederate soldiers who were building the trenches around Petersburg at the end of the Civil War, and they said that Petersburg had so many fortifications that it was time to call them 50fications. So this kind of thing, right? But solid copy is good. And I remember so clearly the time I spent with a friend of mine. I don't know him super well, but he married a movie star, and he's this is public knowledge now. But he's on SEAL team. I'm not going to say which one. And he asked me if I wanted to come over and show me some handgun controlled tricks. And I thought, well, not tricks, techniques. And I thought, probably knows what he's doing. And I was there before he hung up the phone. It was like a little outline of Bill made in dust, like on the Roadrunner cartoons. But listening to him talk, I mean, I'm not immune to this. I went in there and I said something. I've told this story before. So do you guys use the double tap? See, double tap is a term that we shooters know. We're all part of the same club. Do you use the double tap out there? Is that what you guys do in the system? You use the double Kelly Carlson. Yeah, Kelly Carlson is one of the greatest people I ever met. I plan to use her in this thing a lot, and it's a shame because. And I'm quite sure she'll do it. I haven't asked her yet, so don't ask her for me. But I'm sure she'll do it. I know her rather well. And the problem with using a CG version of Kelly Carlson is you can't make CG look as good as Kelly Carlson does. Kelly Carlson is the kind of person, when she walks into a room, there is a spotlight that is on her all the time. You cannot explain it. It's just true. When that person walks in a room, and that. So anyway, there I was acting like Mr. Coolio, and the guy, I said, so do you guys, when you're clearing the room, there's another term that we shooters use. Do you guys do the double tap? And he said, no, we pretty much just keep shooting them until they're dead. And that moment is seared into my brain as a writer. It's seared into my brain. I never forget that. I will never forget the embarrassment, not even so much the embarrassment in terms of how I look to him, but the internal embarrassment of it. Do you use the double tap? No, we pretty much just keep shooting them until they're dead. And I thought, that is what reality sounds like. Double tap and all the rest of this stuff is things that I learned from movies, from lazy writers. But if you talk to the actual guys, you get this kind of clarity all the time. And I've mentioned this before, but it's been a while. Once he started talking, I just, all my recorders, like set recorders to high speed. I'm taking all this data in. I'm just soaking it up because I'm going to need this someday. And I'm listening to him, and I'm watching him, and he's talking, showing me how to do a reload and all this other stuff. And he said, no, you don't want to do it down here, Bill. You don't ever want to. You don't want to ever want to leave your workspace. I said, you leave your what? He said, your workspace. I forget the numbers. 40 or 50 degrees high, and it's 170 degrees wide. Your workspace. He said, yeah, our workspace. This is basically our peripheral vision. Everything we do in our workspace. When we reload, we bring the pistol up into our workspace. We're never looking down. And I thought to myself, you're damn right you're never looking down. This is what I'm speaking to myself, my internal dialogue. You're never looking down, because if you're looking down to load that pistol, that might be the half second when some guy with an AK comes around the corner and you are no longer in the SEAL team. And on and on and on. And I'm just soaking this stuff up, and I'm just recording it because I realize this is what reality sounds like. And you have to do the research. And furthermore, you can't just go and talk to SEALs. You've got to, because if you are a Hollywood dipshit and you go and talk to SEALs, then they will give you as much SEAL stuff as they think a Hollywood dipshit can take, or deserves, which is a better word. You can't just go and interview these guys or talk to them. You've got to go and talk to them, and without trying to pretend like you're going to lay down a fat beat in your hoodie, you've got to convince them that you're authentic, that you authentically care, that you've done as much research as possible, you know the groundwork. And then they'll really open up to you. And then you can get just magic. It's absolute magic. I remember I was on the deck of the Spruance. I got flown out there as a distinguished visitor. That's how low the standards are in the Navy. And they said, now, if you want to step over here on the starboard side here, the starboard side of midships, we're going to show you the torpedo launchers. We're not going to do an actual torpedo launch, but you might want to see this. So off we go. And they introduced some guy, some lieutenant or Lieutenant JG, some junior officer. And he says, oh, I'm the torpedo officer, I'm the specialist on this or whatever. And we're going to be, we've got this thing ready to go. We're not going to launch it, but it's actually not a combat torpedo. It's a kind of an acoustic torpedo. It goes out and sounds or something like that. And I was standing next to the exec, and I'm just thinking out loud, And I said to him, I said, you could take something like that. If you put that in the water, you could swim it out. And then you could start pinging things, and then you'd get all the benefits of active sonar, but you wouldn't be giving your position away. You'd just be giving away the position of the torpedo. And the exec turns to me and he gives me this look like, yeah, you could maybe do something like that, I suppose that's a possible use for this thing. And it was that look like, are you just like kind of smart, or are you a security risk? Turns out I'm both. Anyway, so I will look at this. He's provided a link, and I'm looking forward to it. And thank you for the kind words, Eduardo. That's really nice of you. Graham Godfrey says, I'm still free. You can't take the sky from me. Amen, brother. That's another great example. We've talked before about how and Jeremy Boring's really made this case much better than I do. He says that you can tell the real Joss Whedon because when Joss Whedon is writing his characters, that's what he really believes. All of the political garbage that he spouts is stuff that he thinks he believes and stuff he's supposed to believe, but the real Joss Whedon is Mal. And I think he's right about that. And so that movie had, that series, I didn't watch all of the series. I watched the movie, I liked it very much. But that has kind of there's a version of the Ring of Truth in Firefly and in Mal Reynolds. That's that same kind of thing you get with Denzel and Gene Hackman. It's kind of a hyper reality. It's a reality beyond reality, but it feels real. And of all the lines that I ever heard, not only defined this character, it's one of the best lines ever to define a character ever. And I know there's fans out there that are going to get it right, but when I heard him say, somebody said, "Are you going to kill me?" He says, "No, I'm not going to kill you. If I'm ever going to kill you, you're going to be looking at me and you're going to be armed. I thought, wow, 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 wow. Yeah, that's all you need to know, right? You're going to be looking at me and you're going to be armed. Got it. I got it. I understand this guy. That was brilliant. So there you go. On and on. And somebody pointed out that I should point out that the second season, I won't kill you, but I don't have to save you. Marisha says another one of his. He was a really brilliantly written character, and I'm pretty good friends with Adam Baldwin, who played Jane in that show. As a matter of fact, Adam Baldwin and I were watching the 2020 election returns together, and somewhere around 10 o'clock at night, he said to me, "Should we switch to MSNBC now so we can watch him cry?" I said, "Maybe a little early for that." He's a great guy. He's just a regular guy. He's everything you would think he would be, and more. And I'd like to hire him as well. And I might even think about hiring international film and radio television star Nick Searcy. Anyway, a couple more, and then I'm going to go and take my leave of you. Clay Bradley. Hi, Bill. Long time no see. You talked about privatizing everything, especially in relation to things like the FBI. What are your solutions to making sure that a privatized system like that does not fall into corrupted hands like we see at Disney and Company? I'm sorry, at Disney and Coca-Cola and other large corporations. I guess I have some fundamental confidence that a board of directors would be more effective at ensuring that people played by the rules than the general electorate would be. And the reason I would have more confidence in that is that unlike the general population, no, it's actually not true. The board of directors of a private company are concerned with the corporation executing the mission for which it has been constituted. If you're talking about a security firm, they've got to provide security. If you're talking about an investigative company, they've got to do investigations. And if they do things that stop their efficiency of being a good investigation company, you would think that the enlightened self-interest of the people on the board who would like to continue to make money, and the money they put into it they'd like to get back, you would think that they would be more strict about getting this guy back into the investigation business and less into the politics business. That is the basics of how I think it might work. But I was going to say that at least that private corporation would be doing things that were, they'd be basically following the money. They'd want to, unlike the general elector, they'd want to keep the money flowing. And then I realized, don't be ridiculous, man. That's the reason the general electorate votes the way it does. They want to keep the money coming. That's it. Wizard says, sadly, Bill, the board at Disney going woke and broke stands as proof of contrary. By the way, I shot a Moving Back to America today, 19 people there or something. And I will edit it tomorrow and release it. We're a day late this whole week. And it's called Blind. And it's about, I don't know if you've seen the new Army recruitment ad. I could play it, but I'm not going to. But I talked about this with Zoe today, too. We did two Zoe shows today. And the second show was about standing up to the woke mob and how they backed down. So Coke went woke. Have a woke and a smile, And the second it got out that Coke was teaching its employees to be less white, Coke backpedaled, fired the company and just backpedaled. When it got out that Disney was doing the same thing, I read today, hasn't happened, but I read today, according to sources, they have removed that from their employee training thing. And the thing I talked to Zoe about was, why is it that we're fighting an enemy? We give the left all the power they have, we give to them. They don't have guns. They're not threatening us with physical violence. They're threatening us with emotional distress or discomfort. And so we collapse and we cave. The thing that amazes me is every time you stand up to them, they just go away. Disney's not going to the mat on this one, and neither is Coke. Neither one of them went to the mat on this, which tells me that this is not a core belief of theirs, because if it was, they that's the hill they would fight and die on. It tells me that it's something that they think they should be doing, but when people say don't do that, they stop. And that's really it's really that simple. They just plain stop. And so what conclusions can you draw if you feel like you're losing a fight with an enemy that runs away every time you show up on the battlefield? What conclusions would you draw from that situation, which seems to be the truth? Every time you stand up to these people, they back down. So why are they winning? Logic would tell us that the only real explanation, or at least the most likely one, is they're winning because we're not showing up. They're winning because we're not pushing back. They're winning because we're letting them win, and we're just plain not even on the battlefield. It's a win by default. The other team didn't show up. It's the Gators versus the Seminoles. Who wins? Oh, that Florida State team just didn't make it. Well, I guess we win then, because we did make it. We're here. How much of this do we have to watch before we actually learn this lesson? Anyway, so yes, the fact that they're essentially doing this in the dark. Somebody in the comment section talked about sunlight being a great disinfectant. Let's not forget that the Act Less White and the whole Coke thing and the Budweiser thing, these were leaked. And when they say they were leaked, I'm going to assume that somebody violated either an NDA or company policy or some kind of contract. But in any event, neither Coke nor Disney nor Budweiser broadcasted, hey, we're doing diversity training and we're teaching our employees how to be less white. They're doing it because they are in anticipatory compliance with the people who can erase their identities. But once there's pushback, they fold. We should be praying to have enemies that fold when you show up. You know? This is a prayer. This is a prayer that has been answered, and we don't even realize it, let alone not take advantage of it. We're fighting people who surrender when you show up. What does that tell you? What does Goya tell you when AOC comes out and basically says, here's a company filled with Nazis? The next day, what's their sales 6 times what they were the day before? We're going to make her Employee of the Year. How many times do we have to watch this data point before we realize that not only should we stand up to them, but it's the easiest way out. Stand up to them, they go away. This is why I get more confident every day that goes by. I really do. I feel better and better and better every single day. Because I think what's coming is, you can't, if people don't read or research or find out what the left is really about, then you can't blame people for voting for the left. And what we're seeing now is, now people are getting to see what the left is all about. And as I pointed out in my right angle, while I'm never happy to see people suffering or hurting, I think it's a great thing that we happen to lose a pipeline for a few days. Because now, when people start talking about closing down pipelines, now there's something that they can connect to. Do you think we should shut down this pipeline? Well, yes, I think we should shut down the pipeline because apparently they leak oil all over the place and are killing the planet. Well, they don't. But let's just shut down a pipeline so you see what happens when we shut down a pipeline. Oh, wait a minute. I can only buy 5 gallons of gas and I have to pay $10 a gallon? Yes, that's what happens when you shut down pipelines. This is what you voted for, so there you go. Now, in this case, it was Russian hackers, but this is what you voted for. Oh, well, I hadn't quite realized that. Yes, I know that. We realize it, you don't. This is why I'm feeling good. I would prefer that we didn't have to go through this pain and economic destruction and displacement and embarrassment and all the rest of it. I mentioned this today when I was talking about this new Army recruitment ad. We are going to pay for all of this woke stuff. When we need the military, it'll be there the way it has always been there. And all of this nonsense will just burn away. And with any luck, as I said on the show this morning, I know this is controversial, but it's the truth. Not only are we going to get our teeth knocked in I pray that we do, because I have not seen an instance in American history, I don't think I know of an instance in human history, where the side that suffered the initial defeat went on to lose the war. Virtually every example I can think of, whichever side took the big 2x4 to the face at the beginning of the war, they're the guys that won. We took Pearl Harbor and we won. We took 9/11 and we won. We took Bull Run and we won, and meaning the Union, and on and on and on it goes. Democracies need to be smacked into action. And all of the weakening of the military that we're doing now is just leading to that. For 50 years, we had a military that was so strong and appeared so strong that it actually defended the country without having to shoot at anybody. But now, hi. We're good, thank you.
Okay.
Good night. Now, when you see this cartoon about this recruitment for the army, people in Russia and China are going to see this and they're going to say that they're completely lost it. They're done. They're finished. And they'll be making the same mistake that Tojo and Hitler and Jefferson Davis and Kaiser Bill and all the rest of them did. Did we win after 9/11? Yes, Roy, we did. We did. We haven't lost any buildings to Muslim terrorists since that day. And for those of you that were fully awake, and I don't mean like consciously awake, I mean just living through it. On September 12th, I thought we were going to see another September 11th. And for 5 or 6 years, at least that long, I couldn't watch a Super Bowl halftime or a New Year's Eve celebration without thinking there's going to be a loud bang here any minute. Taliban are still there, Roy says. Yes, that's true, but they're still there. And they are what they were before. They're just a bunch of ragged savages. And it's true we're leaving Afghanistan, which I think after 20 years is probably not a bad idea. But if they're talking about us getting boots off the ground, I think, okay, well, we tried the boots on the ground. But if they ever tell me that we're no longer flying drones over Afghanistan, then I'm going to have a problem. Yeah, we have not had a terrorist hijacking of a plane that I'm aware of. I don't think so. Not an American plane anyway. Since 9/11, it's looking convincingly like Malaysia. Was it 371, the 777 that just disappeared into the sky? That was compelling. I think virtually insurmountable evidence that was a pilot. I believe he was a Muslim pilot, but I don't know if it was a politically motivated event. In any event, it looks like a Malaysian flight, was it 371 that disappeared? The co-pilot went to the bathroom or something like that. Pilot locked the door, and instead of crashing it into the ocean, he depressurized the cabin. And he flew on, well, the jet flew on anyway, for 370, thanks. Flew for 7 or 8 hours. 777's longest range airplane in the world, I think. And he basically just took the plane up to altitude, got it high enough, depressurized the cabin, killed everybody, and then turned it out over the Indian Ocean, South Pacific, and the plane just flew for 7 or 8 hours until it ran out of fuel, which is telling me that he probably killed himself long before that happened. I suspect he probably depressurized the cabin as well. But in any event, that's what it looked like, what happened. But that's not a terrorist attack on the country. And you cannot take human insanity out of the mix. That's always going to be there. People are always going to do crazy things. But in terms of, do you remember what it was like in those years? In the months, it was months after 9/11. I worked on a movie studio lot at the time. And when I came into the parking lot, we had to wait in a long line of cars so security guys could look underneath our cars for bombs, because we thought that as a movie studio, we're part of the Western decadent, information thing, and we were a potential target. I remember thinking, I don't think we're exactly a prime target, but somebody it was, I guess it was The Onion did a sketch on somebody like the you know, the Southern Winnetka Public Library's anti-terrorism protocols are in place. You know, it's like we may not have been a very high target, but we were a higher target than most. Um, and yeah, they're gone. So we sit alone and go our happy way. Yeah, what, Bin Laden, Muslim terrorists, they're a bunch of savages. And then we watch these buildings come down. Boom. Okay. And then we go into action, and we get a president who's not the guy who could have taken the shot and didn't. And 80,000 Al Qaeda killed in Iraq and Afghanistan, something like that. They're dead. They're buried in the sand out in the desert. You can make the case maybe it wasn't worth it. I believe it was, but the reason I believe it was because I have trained myself to not just record the hits. I also have to look at the misses. I have to find out what the ratio is. If I'm going to be concerned about a plane crash, I also need to be aware of the fact that 45,000 planes don't crash every day. And that's the same thing for COVID. 600 people died of COVID today. Okay. That's extra death. There's no question about that. How many people died of heart disease today? How many people died of murder today? How many people died of suicide? How many people died of diabetes? How many people died of cancer? What's the context? Where does it fit? How big is it? What's the scale? You can't know the scale of anything unless you got something to compare it to. Now, as Marusha says, she's on a roll tonight, or he. TSA, NSA, and Patriot Act are huge losses. That's absolutely true, and you could maybe even make the case that the cure is worse than the disease, and I have made that case before. But with that said, the problem that they were put in place to eliminate was eliminated. The problem is that TSA, NSA, and the Patriot Act I don't think had anything to do with it. I think that boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan are the reason we don't have to worry about Al-Qaeda anymore. And when Donald Trump came into office, you remember how ISIS was in the news every other day with these atrocities and taking over huge swaths of territory, huge tracts of land falling to ISIS on a daily basis. And then Donald Trump comes into office, and on day 2, he drops the largest non-nuclear weapon in the inventory. 6 months later, they're gone. Turns out that, unlike what the left believes, if you fight terrorists, you don't just make new terrorists. If you make becoming a terrorist a death sentence instead of a path to glory, recruitment falls. And in the same way that the Barbary pirates and the Nazis aren't a threat to us anymore, this business about, well, every time you fight them, they just grow. They just make them stronger. It's ridiculous. Just ridiculous. But yes, as I've said before, and as Lady Hawk is saying here, we're never going to we're never going to go. NSA is never going to say condition is green. Never. It will never happen. I don't even think they'll say that it's going to be yellow. She said it's going to be orange forever. I think, yeah, exactly. And it had no effect on it whatsoever. It was the passengers and the crews and the individuals that did that. I'm going to do 2 more. Okay. Japeth Dennis. What a cool name. In fact, I'm going to just do 1 more. Sorry, gang. Coming up on 2 hours, and I'm feeling a little burned. Japeth Dennis says, "Hey, Bill, I very rarely get to watch live, but I've been here since before TSL 1. Now, Japeth, I know that this is a fake name and a fake posting because there was nothing before TSL 1. The universe did not exist then. The universe came into being with TSL 1, but we'll pretend like we didn't know that. I've shown the Japan nuke video and the American exceptionalism videos to dozens of people. Anyway, through the Wu-Flu experience, the left has found a new tool for their petty tyranny and desire to micromanage every aspect of life. The left has forced businesses to enforce their dictates, masking, distancing, etc. What do you think we can do to remove this tool from their arsenal for the next crisis?" Let me preface this by saying this. My experience has been during the pandemic that the huge majority of conservatives have done an astonishingly good job of assessing the actual risk of this pandemic. I think conservatives have absolutely dialed in precisely how dangerous this pandemic is and have behaved accordingly. We don't see conservatives living in this perpetual state of fear, wearing a mask inside their own car when they're by themselves, like the good ones do. Um, we see them looking around and saying, okay, who do I know has caught this? Do I know people who caught it? Yeah, over time I do. And as the pandemic proceeded, I began to know more and more people who had caught it, and I don't know anybody who died from it. I have a cousin in Australia who caught it before the lockdown. She got it in early March. And I said, how was it? She said, it wasn't fun 2 days, but I'm fine. And then Instapundit, Glenn Reynolds gets it, and a bunch of other people I knew get it. President of the United States got it. And conservatives have a very good ability to assess risk. That doesn't mean that people just went around saying it's nothing, but they put it into perspective. They were able to read the data in the sense of not actually even looking at the data so much as just being aware of what's going on and coming to a common sense, reasonable conclusion. If this had been yellow fever or Ebola, aerosolized Ebola, I would have a completely different attitude about masks and leaving the house and all the rest of that stuff. But it isn't, so I don't. So in answer to your question, I like to think that people won't put up with it again. I can tell you that my take on the feeling of the country is that, well, I don't think there's any question that trust in the government is zero, and trust in the media is in negative numbers now. So if this thing, not if, when the next pandemic appears, I think we're going to have to, we'll do what we do now. We'll say, okay, let's have a look at some of the numbers. How deadly is this thing? And is this thing, in the case of COVID, it's not just a case of the cure being worse than the disease. History will record this as the single greatest example of the cure being worse than the disease. In other words, all of the lockdowns, I don't think, have prevented any real deaths in a significant number. Once that virus got out of China, once it got out of Wuhan, then it's out and there's nothing you can do about it, except for build a wall around the small numbers of people who are really at risk. But we did the exact opposite. And we've learned a lot of things. We've learned the government can't be trusted with temporary power. We've learned that emergency edicts trump all of our constitutional rights, and that governors can simply decree, waving their perfumed handkerchief, I believe I shall have the peasants stay inside for another 6 months. We've let that happen. I don't know what's going to happen the next time. I have a very strong feeling that once we get out of this one and people are going back more or less to normal, I think the willingness to do this again is going to be much, much smaller. I think if we have to face this idea of a lockdown again, it's going to have to be something that is going to be seriously worthy of being afraid of. I think that this is going to go down as a real lesson for all of us in a lot of ways. And I've been shocked and disappointed by the reaction in general of the American people, and utterly disgusted at the reaction of government agencies and experts. So what will the people do? I don't know. Roy Hamill's pointing out the business about Dr. Fauci. I may do a firewall on this, even though the last firewall didn't even break 10,000. I try to make the moving back to America's like mini firewalls. I really do. But I saw an article that basically got down to the actual science in terms of which explanation for COVID is the more plausible one. Natural emergent from the animal population, or accidentally released from a lab. And I believe it was accidentally released, because if you're going to intentionally release a virus and try to pretend like it's a natural virus, I don't think you do it right next to the Wuhan Virology Center. So in this analysis, they took a look at this particular virus, and I'll just go into this in some shallow detail. One of the reasons to believe, at least initially, that this was a natural occurrence, that it came out of nature and infected the human population, was because COVID is of the same family as the two previous pandemics, both of which came out of China, which was SARS-1 and MERS. Is it sudden acute respiratory syndrome, I think? One of them was in 2002-ish, the other was in 2012-ish. I don't remember the exact dates. Something like that. But in both of those cases, a virus that lived in the lived in the animal population transitioned into humans. And here's where it gets interesting. In those first two cases, there is a clear pathway of things that happen. First of all, they found the animal host. Secondly, they could look at the human infections and essentially watch as the virus through natural selection became more and more suitable to infect humans. There was a pathway where you could watch the virus, again through mutation and natural selection, becoming more deadly as the more successful strains reproduced. There was a physical line that you could draw on a map from here's case one, here's what happened later, and it goes right down this highway, and sure enough, boom, all of these things are there for SARS-1 and MERS. But COVID-19, which they're calling SARS-2 because of the similarity, is very, very, very different. They claim it's in bats. You know what the single greatest evidence that the whole natural origin for COVID-19 is a lie? And it's a little minor thing like Zuckerberg having the president of China naming his first child. Buried in this incredibly detailed report was a point that seems so minor, but to me it's the game over thing, and that is simply this: COVID-19, SARS-CoV-2, is not very effective at infecting bats. In other words, the host, the animal host that it presumably came from, that we're told is where it came from, COVID-19 doesn't infect bats very well. But it came into the human population perfectly adapted to infect humans, and there was no string of mutations. There was no physical connection to the animal source. I think MERS was the animal intermediary was a camel, believe it or not, and the other one was it like a kind of like a ferret, a meerkat, something like that. But those two cases were clearly natural, and none of that is there for COVID. None of it. It comes into the world a block away from the Wuhan Virology Center, perfectly adapted to infect humans, and there's more. The Chinese tried to say it came from this wet market, which was just down the street, but the first recorded cases, I'm talking about individual cases now, in Wuhan, the first 5 or 10 or 20 or 30, 50 cases, most of those people had no connection with the wet market whatsoever. In other words, those infections occurred with people who either had not been to the wet market or knew anybody who'd been to the wet market. The Chinese go in there and they basically take a flamethrower to the wet market, destroy all the evidence. By the way, Maricopa County, I found out today, has destroyed all of the database evidence of the 2020 election. They have erased the files. Sometimes the best evidence is the stark shamefulness of the cover-up. So, back to the SARS thing. This is the game over thing for me. I need to reread the article. I was thinking about this actually because I realized, I am just smart enough to understand this stuff, but not so smart that I can just understand it. I have to break it down into simpler things that I can understand, and I can share that with people, and that apparently is of some value to some of us. But in a nutshell, the two previous coronaviruses, SARS-1 and MERS, and virtually all these other viruses, in order to infect a cell, especially a human cell, they've got a receptor that attaches to the cell. And then what has to happen, this is a little bit complicated, but stay with me here if I understood this correctly. This receptor attaches the virus to the cell, but for the virus to get inside the cell, something has to happen. It's called cleaving. They have to cut, the outside part of that receptor has to be cut off so that the inner part of the receptor can then penetrate the membrane of the cell, get inside the cell, and then do the thing that the viruses do. And in the previous two versions, and in virtually all of the viruses, the cleaving, the cutting off of that, is performed by the cell itself. The cell membrane is what severs that initial protein connection and allows the SARS or the virus to penetrate the cell. But COVID-19 comes with its own scissors. It cuts itself. It doesn't have to rely on the cell. It has been engineered to do that critical function without which you cannot have a sustainable infection. So this virus, unlike all these other viruses, does not depend on the cell to cut this thing off and then allow it to, it cuts itself. And that is awfully compelling evidence. And then you look at the case for the natural explanation. Okay, so the official explanation is that the natural host organism is bats. Okay, but you find out that the nearest bats that are infected with COVID-19 are something like 1,900 kilometers away from Wuhan. Now, I don't know what that is in real measurement, but it's a bit of a walk. You find out that bats, over the course of their lifetime, might migrate, over the course of a decade, probably 50 kilometers. So the nearest infected animal was 2,000 kilometers away from where the outbreak occurred. And more importantly than this, because you could make the case that somebody went in, messed around with the bats, drove to Wuhan, had been infected in the cave, and then drove to Wuhan and started the infection there. That is entirely possible. It's about 1,000 miles. Thanks, Helios. A little more. But since that person in contact with the bats would be unaware that they're infected, if that were the actual explanation, and as was the case in both SARS-1 and MERS, there should be a line of infected people going from the host animal to wherever it's going, so that if a guy had gotten it 1,000 miles away from Wuhan in a bat cave, there should be a line of infected people connecting that bat cave with Wuhan. As this person or persons traveled back down to Wuhan, they would be buying gasoline, they'd be in restaurants, they'd be doing all these other things, interacting with other people, and there should be a chain of infection that follows this down there. There isn't any, none. It just appears, and it appears in the city just a couple hundred yards away from the Wuhan virology lab. Now, here's the thing that really did knock my absolute socks off. So the Wuhan Institute of Virology presumably is a level 4 biohazard facility. The amount of control over a pathogen is, there's 4 degrees of it. Now, whenever you see a movie like Infection or Contagion or any one of these things, when you see the guys in the big blue suits and they're, it's like kind of Andromeda strain, and they've got overpressure suits, they're completely sealed, and the air pressure inside the suit is greater than the outside air pressure, so that if there's a hole, no viruses can get in because air is blowing out. And all of those level 4 containment things that you see, which Wuhan should have had, because there's no question they were working on bat viruses and gain of function. In other words, they were modifying bat viruses to make them more infectious. This is not up for discussion. There's a Chinese woman who's spoken at seminars all around the world talking about this. So it's supposed to be a level 4 facility, but it turned out that some of the, most of the bat research, just pretend for a minute that it didn't come from the lab. The research that they were doing that was supposed to be in level 4 was not a very good level 4, but they were doing a lot of it in level 3, and some of the research they were doing in level 2. Do you want to know what level 2 biocontainment standards are? You want to know how rigorous they are? Your dentist office has to maintain level 2 biosafety protocols. Your dentist office. In other words, he has to sterilize the instruments and change the rubber gloves. So they are essentially playing with the virus in a dentist's office. That's the level of protection that the Chinese put on this thing. So, now it gets interesting. So, the Chinese announce This is one Chinese woman especially, a bat lady, I think they called her. She says, we're going to make bat viruses more infectious to humans because we want to figure out a way to do a vaccine. Well, the actual benefits of this have been zero. The actual results have been catastrophic. But let's just give them the benefit of the doubt. This facility in Wuhan was so badly run that when American scientists went there in 2012, 13, 14, somewhere in there, they went there and said, this is not good at all. These people, meaning the Chinese, they are not capable of running a level 4 facility. They don't have a clue. They know what it's supposed to look like, but they don't. It's the containments are terrible. And it was so bad that the United States government stopped some funding that it was doing. It was doing funding into this gain of function. And the U.S. government said, well, okay, our own scientists have been there, so this place is just a shack. They don't know what they're doing, so let's cut the funding. Okay, great. So they cut the funding. But funding was secured for a company called EcoHealth or something like that. I forget the guy's name. But funding still went to the lab. And the person that made sure that the lab in China, in Wuhan, continued to get funded for this gain of function research, the person who made that possible is Dr. Anthony Fauci. He's the one who authorized funds going from the government to an intermediate kind of company. And this company, by the way, this intermediate company, I've forgotten the name of it, they're the ones who immediately said, no, there is no chance this is an artificial virus. It's absolutely 100% scientifically proven to come out of nature. There's no evidence of that whatsoever. The people who made the statement were the people who had funded the Wuhan virology lab's gain of function research. And this had been made possible by Dr. Anthony Fauci. Now, this is all true. This is not speculation and it's not theory. It is entirely within the realm of possibility that everything that they say is what actually happened. It is possible that even though Fauci sent money to the Wuhan virology lab against the wishes of Congress and so on, basically snuck them money, it's possible that this actually did come from an animal host, perfectly equipped to infect humans maximally, including their own little pair of scissors to get into the cell. But that's theoretically possible. It's theoretically possible that Dr. Fauci's advice has been 100% accurate and not influenced in any way by his involvement with the process. This is all theoretically possible. But when you string all of this stuff together, you now are facing, you are beyond reasonable doubt. Beyond reasonable doubt. So, do you blame the Chinese government for this? Yes, I do. They killed millions of people. Are we complicit in this? Yes, we are. U.S. money went to the Wuhan virology lab to fund this research. So it's not like we walk out of this with clean hands. I will look at Brett Weinstein, but this report is extraordinarily well researched, and this is where I'm useful. I am just smart enough to know accurate scientific thinking when I see it, and I can ask questions that are not obvious to other people. And just because I've trained myself how to think critically about this, and most of you can do this too, but to me, it's not even up for discussion. Now, the big issue that is still up in the air is, was it accidental? I don't know if you really want to have it come out of the lab or have it appear in the city where your lab is, but there's no question that the Chinese, it's not up for discussion. It's just true. For 10 days, 11 days, they allowed people to travel from Wuhan to LA or Rome, but not to other parts of China. They knew what they had, and they let it out. They didn't let it into China. They let it out in the rest of the world. That alone is culpability right there. That's it. But it's not lost on me that Donald Trump was using very effective tactics against China, and that he looked like he was sailing towards re-election, and the economy was absolutely booming. And then all of a sudden, this virus appears that is serious enough to take seriously, but not so serious that it is an actual smite-you-down plague. That part is still up for discussion. It's much more likely that it did accidentally leak because the standards are so poor. But this is all true, and it's not speculation. This is not some guy's theory. This is the actual fact about this particular virus, the history of it, and so on. And the guy who wrote the report this is why I believe the report, because this guy is constantly saying this is not conclusive proof. It is theoretically possible that these other things happen. But every time you run into one of these things, like what's the likelihood that the virus comes equipped with its own scissors to get itself into a human cell? It's unlikely. We haven't seen that before. How close is the nearest animal vector to the outbreak of the infection site? It's about 1,000 miles away. Is there a way to explain that? Yeah, there's a possibility, but it's not likely. And every time you get to another one of these, but it's not likely, you are flipping the coin again, right? If it's one weird thing, it's a coin flip. Head or tails, yeah, maybe it happened. Now you've got two unusual things. Now it's two coin flips. And you get heads both times. Okay, that's not shocking. Now you have a third event, and now it's got to be head again. So now it's heads 3 times in a row. That's still not a crazy unlikely event. But as you start to get into flipping a coin 4 times in a row, that's unlikely. 5 times in a row is getting extremely unlikely. 10 times in a row is impossible. There's a story about a scientist, I think it was working on the Manhattan Project. At least this is how I remember the anecdote. It's a scientist, a very, very bright guy. And he says that he's in this meeting, he's going to meet a very famous general, very successful general. And the scientist says, well, how do you know that he's a successful general? And the guy says, well, because he's won 5 battles in a row. And the scientist says, I'm not so much impressed with that. Now, if you bring me a general who's won 10 battles in a row, there's a guy that understands statistics and understands probability. And every time you add a coin flip, you cut the odds of it in half again, and again, and again, and again, and again, and again. But the mystery to me, and we just have to face this, I understand why it happened. I'm just disappointed that it happened. The mystery is why Donald Trump put him in that position and kept him in that position. Because whether it happened naturally or not, COVID-19 cost him the election, that and other things, but we'll leave that aside. Yeah. When the Chinese delete the databases, and when they sanitize the crime scene, the wet market, the Wuhan wet market, if that was the source of the infection, you would want to show that to every single virologist in the world. If this was actually true, you would cordon it off so that nobody could get in there, and then you'd send in scientists in full bioprotective gear to take samples, and if it had originated there, you would see signs of it everywhere. You would just see viruses everywhere. But no, flamethrower. Records from the Wuhan Institute of Virology, gone, deleted. Trey Gowdy said something that I will never forget. I admire him so much. I just love him. Trey Gowdy gives me hope for the future. And I was watching Trey Gowdy when he was dealing with, I think it was with the Hillary Clinton email things. But Trey Gowdy said something that I thought was really profound. And Trey Gowdy said, I've been a prosecutor for 20 years or whatever. And he was talking to one of the people about Hillary Clinton's emails. And Trey Gowdy said, as a professional prosecutor, I would rather have evidence of a cover-up than a confession. He said, evidence of a cover-up is the queen of indictment evidence. It is the absolute pinnacle. You can confess to something and still make the defense that you didn't know that what you were doing was wrong. This is Gowdy speaking. He says, but if there's evidence that you covered up something, that you tried to delete something, then that is evidence that not only you committed the crime, but you knew the crime was a crime, and you then took action to erase the crime. It is an indication that you're fully aware of what happened. He said, I'd rather have evidence of a cover-up than a confession. I thought, wow, all right. So there you go. So if all of this is true, what does this mean? Well, certainly it means that Batwoman is one of the greatest mass murderers in history. I mean, she's made the top 10. She may have made the top 5. And since this work was done at the behest of the Chinese government, and since the Chinese government has openly admitted that they're doing this biological warfare as a means of actual warfare, weaponizing these viruses, you know, like I said, if you give it the best possible spin on it, if I'm flying this can't happen, but I'm sure they felt that this virus couldn't get out of the lab either. If I'm flying a B-52 over Brazil and a hydrogen bomb happens to fall out of the bomb bay and detonate over Rio de Janeiro and kills 10 million people, it could be perfectly true that that was not my intention, but it's also perfectly true that I'm 100% responsible for that, right? My country. I mean, that's it. It's not. You don't have to prove intent. You just have to prove negligence, and there's no question about it. So there you go. And speaking of destruction of evidence, I saw this today. I saw a report today on Gateway Pundit that said that the state senators that are doing the investigation of the Maricopa County election have just been told that all of the records have been deleted from the 2020 election. The records have been deleted with no explanation. They've just been deleted. And a senator wrote a letter to the person at the election committee or whoever this guy was, and the letter was magnificent because it was saying, we're inquiring about why this data was deleted. We'd like an explanation so that we can be assured that everything is. It was written in such a perfect tone. Like, well, obviously, there's an excellent reason for why this is. So why don't you let us know so that we can put this investigation to rest? No. Says Cheryl Atkinson has a story on it too. I don't know if it's on the Wuhan thing or the Arizona thing, but you know, there. Kirsten says, I thought there was a law that all records must be kept for a certain amount of time. There is a law, and that law was broken. Don't forget Whittle's first law. Whittle's first law is an important law. Whittle's first law is whenever you see something that looks so terrible, something that the optics are so bad, the only possible explanation for it is that the alternative is worse. That's all you need to know. I really think that's something that really should be engraved in stone. Whenever you see something like Jeffrey Epstein hung himself, really? Well, where's the security camera footage? Oh, the camera shut down for 13 minutes. It what? Yeah, it just kind of broke. Is it working now? Yeah. So you're telling me it just stopped working for 13 minutes and then it started working again, and during that time, when it broke but then fixed itself, that's when he hung himself. Yep. Nobody believes that. But without a media, people forget. They just forget. Where are the records about your emails, Ms. Lerner, about the IRS targeting conservative 501c3s? Unfortunately, the computer disk suffered a malfunction, so we weren't able to retrieve those emails. The hard drive failed. That's right. The hard drive containing the specific emails that we're looking for on that computer failed. Yes. What about the legally mandated backup? That appears to have failed too. It's kept in a separate facility. It's completely independent, right? That's the law. That's why we have a backup. Yep. But it failed too. Yep. So we can't get those emails because the computer failed and the backup failed. This is what she said under oath. Yes. What about the 1,500 other computers on the IRS network that would have copies of at least some of these emails? And she said they failed too. So what do you say about that? This is the important thing. You think, how can they be so stupid to think that we can't see through this? They're not that stupid. They know that we know. They know that we know. And they also know that we're not going to do anything about it. Not anything that matters. There's the whole situation right there. They can lie right to your face and tell you it, and they know that nothing will come of it. It's like Michael Jackson. Michael, did you ever have, how many surgeries did you have? I've never had plastic surgery. Really? No, I had a minor surgery on my nose, but that was just to increase my nostrils. You've never had plastic surgery on your face? Mm-mm. And what about these children of yours? Are you the biological father? Yes, I am. These blonde, blue-eyed kids, you're the biological father of them. Mm-hmm. Cat Williams? Comedian? I think it's Williams. He has a 6-minute rant on Michael Jackson. It is extremely profane. But man alive, Cat Williams, I have never, ever seen anybody flayed alive the way that Cat Williams takes apart Michael Jackson. This is before Michael Jackson died, I believe. I've never seen anybody destroy somebody like that. This was just unbelievable. Unbelievable. It's really worth watching. In fact, I'm going to watch it again after this. So anyway, I'm sure I've discussed enough to have this video either demonetized, certainly, or blocked, or another strike against the channel, or whatever. I don't care anymore. I don't care. It affects our ability to get the message out there, but we have members that pay by the month or by the year, and as long as we continue to have a membership base, we continue to run these videos. We put them on Rumble. We link everything to Rumble, but we put it on YouTube so we can reach people that we're not already reaching. And if we end up losing YouTube, which I suspect is just a matter of time because they are retroactively pulling down videos, they have a standard. We put up a video, it clears the bar. The video stays on YouTube for 3 months. They change the rules, and then they go back and hit you for a strike for a video that passed the rules then, but the rules have changed. They go back retroactively, take down the video, and give you a channel strike for it. So, okay. This can last for a while. All of these things are very effective temporarily. Any kind of totalitarian action, any kind of coercion, any kind of force is exceedingly effective over the short term. But it cannot be maintained. And as I pointed out in the Moving Back to America today, which you haven't seen yet, but which you should see either late tomorrow or Saturday, I am daily, hourly more confident about the future of this country. And the reason is because nobody is buying this stuff. If people were buying it, if Rey Skywalker merchandise were flying off the shelf, if Star Trek Discovery had come in at the top of the ratings instead of being 19th or 20th when it was live on CBS, beaten by a rerun of Celebrity Wheel of Fortune, and so if people were buying that, I'd be concerned. If people were buying any of this, I'd be concerned. And as I pointed out in the show today, the reason I'm not concerned is because the people selling the product don't use the product. What does that tell you? That's you can apply that to socialism. The reason you know socialism is a lie is that the people selling the product don't use the product. Bernie Sanders has 3 houses. The leader of Black Lives Matter has $1.5 million residence. Fidel Castro died with $800 million in his bank account. The people selling the product don't use the product. And as I said in the show, if you were to see a commercial of a quarterback who says, I use this deodorant, and then you go to his house and you find out not only he's not using that deodorant, he's doing another deodorant that he's using, what would that tell you about the product? And more importantly, what would that tell you about the guy? I had to approve, I don't know how many it was. It was at least 20, I would say. Over the course of the Apollo series and the Cold War series, the salespeople at Daily Wire were kind enough to to run every single ad that we ran on those shows past me. I had to approve all of them. I've caught in flack for one of them. I think it was one of these psychological self-help things. And there are a number of things that I rejected. A number of them. I don't think any one of them was something that was just plain fraudulent. There were just a bunch of things that I just didn't want to be a part of. I didn't want my name associated with these things. And so I just didn't. And that's called integrity. And there's more integrity than we realize. Anyway, if you want to find out what's happening in America, go to Sky News Australia. Those guys are covering this stuff like there's no tomorrow. It is actual journalism. And it's kind of a shame you have to go to the other side of the planet to find out what's happening across the street, but at least you can find out. Sky News Australia is reporting just beautifully. It's embarrassing and encouraging at the same time. Anyway, yeah, and by the way, when I'm saying there's nobody buying it, people who are not formally political are now politicized against the left. Critical Drinker is constantly bashing social justice warriors. So's Neurotic, so's Doomcock, and so is Awaken with JP, who was just basically mocking hippies. He had a video out a couple weeks ago saying why I've become a conservative. He wasn't a conservative before woke happened. He was just made into a conservative by the fact that nobody is buying this stuff. Nobody wants it. Nobody. And there you go. If somebody's not using the product that they endorse, then that product is no good. If Al Gore is telling you that consumption of fossil fuels is going to kill the planet and then has an electrical bill that's 6 times that of his neighbors, that is an indication that he does not believe in the product he's selling. And that tells you a lot about the product. As I said, tells you a lot about the person endorsing the product as well. These are the fundamental questions that people should be asking all the time and never do. When I saw a bunch of people sent me links to the 60-minute debunking of what happened in State Farm Arena, and he pointed out, an election official said, no, you can see that these things have all been sealed in the presence of the observers. So the observers were there when we put the seals on this thing, and they saw us put them underneath the table. They told us to stop counting, and so they watched us do this. We put them underneath the table, and then they left, and so it was sealed. I don't know what all the fuss is about. And the 60 Minutes guys going, oh, so this has been debunked yet? Oh, absolutely, yeah. And I'm angry at Donald Trump for portraying it in such a false way. I'm watching this video, and I say to myself, okay, who called them and told them to stop counting? Who made the call? Didn't think to ask. If you put a seal on something with observers in the room, and then you open the seal when the observers are not in the room, you've defeated the seal. That is a violation of the chain of custody of evidence. And you did it on camera. And they just go along with it. And it's not, I know why 60 Minutes goes along with it, but people just, I guess it's been debunked then. I was afraid, because I'd gone out on a limb on this. I said, this looks like pretty compelling evidence. People say, have you seen this thing debunking? And oh, God, here we go. I've stepped on a landmine. I looked at this thing. I said, not only is the debunking not a debunking, the fact that it's such a thin response is an indication that the original charges are true. Why? That just again and again and again. And the bigger question then, who made the call to stop counting? What I want to know is, who made the call to start counting again? Once it was publicly clear that we're going to stop counting for the night, we all agree on this, right? Oh, yeah, we got a call to stop counting. But you did keep counting, right? Yes. And when you did keep counting, the observers were not there, correct? Yes. Who told you to start counting again? Who? I want to know the name of the person who made the call. I want to know who has the authority to tell a counting center that they've got to stop counting votes at 10 o'clock at night. I want to know who that is. Well, our staff is tired. Well, we're asking your staff to work, what, one night every 2 years? Every 4 years, really. Nobody else got tired. They didn't get tired in Florida. They just did the job. It's just, it doesn't pass the smell test. And nobody knows how to even set up the smell test anymore. The most obvious one, I mentioned this before, I'm gonna say it and I'm gonna get out of here. But when the next day arrived after the election and you saw these arcs, and the red arc is Donald Trump, and the blue arc is Joe Biden, and then somewhere at 2 o'clock in the morning, there's this jump, right? Everybody's seen that chart. Well, that's been debunked. It's been officially debunked. It's just conspiracy theory, because it was an input error. Somebody had typed in a number that had an extra digit. Okay, let's put aside the fact that you're expecting to get 40,000 votes, but you record 400,000 votes. And let's put aside the fact that you've got one person entering data that's going to determine the future of the country. You would think that there would be backups to prevent this kind of thing, but let's just say this happened. This spike is because of an input error, right? Yes, that was a mistake. Well, then when you correct the mistake, that jump will go back down again, right? Right? If this little tick that is evidence of this going on, if this little tick is an error, then when you correct the error, the chart would go back down again, right? But they don't do it. And it's like I said before, it's not that they think we buy it, it's just that they know we won't do anything. Most people don't care. The media throws the cloak of invisibility over the whole thing, and there you go. So you get what you pay for. But these are fundamental questions. Fundamental questions. Guy did an analysis of the Georgia stuff and said that the votes were coming in from different precincts, not at the same numbers, but at precisely the same ratio. And that at any given point in time, 7 or 8 precincts are reporting votes at the same exact ratio. And then that ratio changed, and then they all started reporting at the same ratio again. That's absolute mathematical certainty evidence. Nope. It's all slowly coming out, and history will show what actually happened. And all of you saw how upset I was about this, and a number of you thought I was losing my mind, and you were right. It was the biggest outrage I have ever seen, and remains so. But now, I'm not saying I'm glad it happened, and I think it's a catastrophe. Let's just be clear on this. It's an absolute, utter catastrophe. But now people get to watch what happens when you take a senile person, a puppet, and run them for office. Somebody said Joe Biden's very grateful for the gas crisis because it pulls people's attention away from the border crisis and the inflation crisis and all the other crises. We're just in the early days of this. You wait till the real game happens. And this is why I'm so confident. I don't know how long it's going to last. We all know this is true. It's not up for discussion. We all know it's true. Progressives know it's true. A certain decent amount of time will go by. We don't know how long it'll be, a couple more months or something like that. And then Joe Biden will not be recalled from office. Joe Biden will make an announcement saying that out of my deep love for the country, I realize that I'm beginning to slowly lose my mental acuity. He'll talk about how it happens to so many millions of other Americans, and he'll talk about all the suffering of all. He'll talk about all of this. And then he's going to do the act of a great patriotic hero. He is going to voluntarily resign. This will be the story. He's going to voluntarily resign because he realizes that he's beginning to lose his mental edge. Not that he's lost it. He's beginning to notice certain signs that maybe he's not as sharp as he was, and he doesn't want to risk it. So for the good of the country, he's going to fall on the sword and step down, and they'll call him a hero, and they'll praise him to the skies. And then we get then the intermission, then the overture is over, then we get into Act 1. And here's why I am so confident. Kamala Harris is incapable, physically incapable, of speaking any kind of truth without bursting into laughter. It's a tell, and it's not controllable. She will burst into laughter over anything that is uncomfortable, no matter how bad it looks. So the second thing that's going to happen is some major catastrophe is going to happen to this country. Something big is going to happen to this country while she's president, and she's going to be laughing about it. That's when people will know. That's when they'll know. When they see the president of the United States talking about like some kind of attack or something like that, and she will not be able to restrain this kind of then we'll know. And it's not something she can control. They don't send her to the border because she would be laughing the whole time. It's a tick, yes. It's not a tick. I have a little bit of a problem with a tick because a tick makes it sound like it's like a physiological thing. It's a psychological response to her inability to tell the truth. Anytime she has to say anything that could possibly be true and possibly hurt her, she psychologically goes to the laugh to make it seem like it's not important. Okay, so what we're going to find out is we're going to see what happens to the country when a political party and the media artificially push a senile, demented man and a lunatic woman who came in last in her own state in the primary. She came in last in California. They pulled it off. You don't have to like it. It makes me sick to even say it, but they did. Here we sit. We know who's in the office. But now reality is going to have its say, and this is why I'm so confident. I am a conservative because I believe that conservatism conforms to reality. Whether I like the reality or not, I believe it conforms to reality. And you can bury reality and you can stuff reality in the closet. You can do all of these things for the short term, but over time, reality is going to win this contest. Over time, it will. And the only way, apparently, to snap a civilization out of its normal cycle of decline, which is based on RK, by the way, for those of you who may be feeling a little bit too sober right now. So now we're going to see. Now we're going to see. They got what they wanted, and now they're going to have to deliver. And they were about to sign 7 peace treaties in the Middle East. Now the Palestinians are launching rockets into Israel, and Israel is responding. And pretty soon we're going to find ourselves engaged in some kind of activity somewhere. And Donald Trump's record as the only president who didn't send our troops to war is going to be perfect on both sides. I guarantee it. They will have to do this. The reason that I'm convinced that there's going to be some military action on the part of the Democratic administration is because they have to do this in order to tell, not because the country needs it. They do it because they have to show America that they're strong. Not that they have to show our adversaries that they're strong. Their adversaries know fully well exactly what's going on. But they have to show them we're tough. We're not, the Republicans accuse us of being soft on this, so we're not. We're going to go do this. Okay, so we're going to go invade Libya, right? Yeah. We came, we saw, he died. You sure are a tough, swaggering alpha bitch, aren't you, Hillary? You are just as macho as they come. We're not going anywhere. The Second Amendment. This is something else I talked about with Zoe today, and this is the last thing I'll say. Oh, we almost did 3 hours. We're doing a long show tonight. We were talking about pushing back against the woke mob and how people collapse when you push back. And the conversation evolved into the salient point, which is the battle for the future of the United States. We thought that the battle against the enslavement of the American people would be a Second Amendment battlefield. But because of the Second Amendment, our Second Amendment defenses, in other words, our armed population, have made it impossible for the government to come after us and take us away because of the guns. Our Second Amendment defense has been so strong that they will not attack on that front because they can't win. They know it. The fight for the future of this country is not a Second Amendment fight. It's never going to come down to shooting in the streets. Never. It's a First Amendment fight. It's all about ideas. They don't have to come and take your guns because they know that they can't do it. That's why we have them. And that's why they're not doing it. They will just continue to tell stories so that your grandchildren will turn your guns in for them, and they'll get the little social credit pat on the head, and their social credit score will go up 20 points for everything they turn in. That's how it's going to work if we don't do something about it. It's a First Amendment fight. It's a First Amendment fight, and here we are, this fully armed and operational battle station. We are it. How do we teach courage to people who don't already have it, to persuade them to risk their lives, fortunes, and sacred honor alone against the mob? Well, one thing we can do, Marusha, is we can pay attention. And this is a theme now, because we had 2 points. 2 points are a line, 3 points are a trend. I am going to be constantly hammering the fact that when we stand up to them, Coke and Budweiser, I don't know about Budweiser yet, but Coke, Disney, all of them, back up. Disney is seriously talking about not only remaking a Star Wars trilogy, but making a Star Wars trilogy that basically takes the existing Star Wars trilogy, puts it inside Assist, and gets it out of canon. It basically, Disney is talking about making at least one Star Wars movie that will undo the entire trilogy that destroyed Luke Skywalker. They're going to say it occurred in a parallel universe, and they're going to run a little bit of Star Wars jargon past it, and then all the fans will be able to say, okay, so all of this, all of this politically correct stuff we saw in the last trilogy happened in an alternate universe, right? So Luke Skywalker's still a hero again, right? Oh yeah, absolutely. They wouldn't be doing that if they weren't paying the consequences, and they wouldn't be paying consequences if people were buying what they're selling, but they're not. So if they're going to remake the Star Wars trilogy because they've destroyed the brand, that is telling me that the people aren't buying it, and that means that we win. Because yes, you can definitely go to war against your customers, but that company will go out of business. A company that goes to war against its customers will go out of business, and a government that goes to war against its citizens has started the clock running. There's not a government in history that has ever lasted, at least not in modern times, that's fought against its people. The Russians pull it off for 70 years, 78 years, something like that, 40, 45 years. When nobody trusts the government, then they will not have the moral authority to compel people to do what they want. And then it'll change. So be of good cheer. It's going to get worse before it gets better, but it's going to get better. And that's it. Tom Bombadil says there's no winning when the left continues to control public education. This is, I know I keep saying I'm going to go. Tom, I don't mean to argue with you, because when they control public education, they can do catastrophic damage. But the one thing that they cannot do is they cannot control reality. They can absolutely, what's the word I'm looking for? Indoctrinate an entire population into believing nonsense. There's no question they can do that. I'm not trying to take away any of it. They absolutely can. They can convince an entire population that what is not true is true, but they cannot change reality. And that's the thing that gives me perpetual hope. They can't do it. On the show this morning, I said, these people, the show's called Blind, these progressives really do believe, they really do believe the idea that the beatings will continue until morale improves. There's absolutely incontrovertible evidence all across the board that they believe this is true. If you continue to beat people, then eventually morale will improve. This is why they're going to lose. Because they are so disconnected from actual reality, they can't see that nobody's buying their stuff. They just know they're not. And the reason that they're not buying it, that the American people isn't buying it, they believe is because they have not whipped us with it enough. The reason we're not buying it is because we're being whipped in the first place. But they're not capable of seeing this. They don't have it. It just eludes them. They're so deep into their theory and so deep in their ideology, they cannot understand. They think the reason that we're not buying it is because they're not selling it hard enough. The reason we're not buying it is because they're selling it at all. And so they'll continue to increase the pressure, and they will continue to increase the response against the pressure. Why did they fold? Why did Coke fold? Why did Disney fold? Let's take Coke. Why did Coke fold? Why did Coke put this thing in place, and the second it got out, all hell breaks loose, and now the guys that put that in place are gone? Why did Coke back up? Why did Gillette back up? Why did all of them back up? If they really believed it, and if the people believed it, they would stand on that hill and they'd fight there. But they don't, because nobody buys it. They look around, there's nobody behind them. Yes, people have been talking about the priest who was arrested. This happened several days ago. The guy who we talked about on one of our right angles, who told the people to get out of his church. The Canadian police arrested him on the highway, took him down like he was a terrorist, because he was apparently encouraging people to go to his church. And that's what they arrested him for on the street. They pulled him over like he was a terrorist, put him on his knees, handcuffed him in the middle of a highway, and put him in jail. That's in Canada. Okay, that actually happened. That's not good. It doesn't make me happy. I don't want to live in that kind of society. But whose side are you on in this? Whose side are you on? That's what matters. That's what matters. They can erase the data from Maricopa County, but how does that look? Does that make you feel more like it was a straight election or less like it was a straight election? This is what I mean by they cannot control a reality. They had to delete the stuff because it was incriminating. Same with the Wuhan lab. They had to delete it because it was incriminating. Whittle's first law: when something looks awful, it's only because the alternative looks worse. Tom Bombadil says within a decade the police will be left wing. It's less than a decade, Tom, and it's not just the police. The military will be filled with woke people. It's already filled with woke people. All this is going to happen. All of it's going to happen, and it's going to be a catastrophe. But when the 2x4 hits us in the face, all of this will just burn away. I'm utterly convinced it will just burn away. The political generals will be gone. All of a sudden, we're going to need real warfighters, and they will be there when we need them. Believe me, they will be there when we need them. They always have been, and I believe they always will be. I believe that the reason we're in this kind of trouble is because we haven't been in any trouble. But the second we're in trouble, our troubles will disappear. It's as good an exit line as any, I guess. We'll see you guys next week.